The big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next few hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me for the next few hours, broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, and also political commentator Jonathan Liss. Right, coming up though, lots to discuss, but before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you and good afternoon. It's just gone 3 o'clock. These are your latest headlines from the GB newsroom. The King says he's greatly saddened by the sudden death of Alex Salmond, former First Minister of Scotland. The Alba leader died yesterday afternoon, aged 69, from a suspected heart attack during a trip to North Macedonia. Mr Salmond had made a speech at the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy Forum and is understood to have collapsed at a lunch in a crowded room. Members of the Scottish public have been reacting to the death.
Well, his passing is a great shock. And I think for most Scots, whatever their opinions, it's sad. He was a pillar of the independence movement.
I think he'll be remembered as the man that nearly got Scotland independence.
Well, he nearly got us independence, but, you know, nearly's not good enough.
I couldn't believe it, to be honest. You're shocked. I don't even know how he died yet, I'm not sure. I met him years ago when he was he was walking around Swinton Crescent in Baillieston, and he was handing out leaflets and that, and he played me at pool.
He's a good man, very good man. Yeah, very good man. Done his best for Scotland, you know.
Alex Salmond, who died yesterday. Robert Jenrick says he'll make Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg chairman of the Conservative Party if he triumphs against Kemi Badenoch in the party leadership contest. As chairman, Sir Jacob, who lost his seat at the general election, will be put in charge of the party's campaigning operations. Mr Jenrick told GB News this morning that Jacob has been a tireless campaigner for the grassroots and he understands better than anyone the need for party reform.
I want to have a different way to select candidates, so we end the favoured sons and daughters of the leader being parachuted in. That was a disgrace.
Yes.
I want to stop members just getting emails asking for money, but never asking what do they want and where do they want the party to go. Let's build a mass membership, democratic organisation. I think Jacob will be a great asset to that.
Elsewhere in politics, Jonathan Reynolds says it's not the government's position that P&O Ferries is a rogue operator, despite a press release this week calling them a rogue employer. P&O Ferries owner, DP World, will attend the International Investment Summit tomorrow. They'd previously threatened to pull out of the event and a £1 billion port investment. That's after the Transport Secretary, Louise Haigh, criticised their employment strategy and called for a boycott. The operator was criticised by politicians from both main parties in March 2022, when it suddenly sacked 800 British seafarers and replaced them with cheaper, mainly overseas staff, saying it was necessary to stave off bankruptcy. The business secretary told GB News' Camilla Tominey that the £1 billion investment will go ahead.
Quickly on this issue, that's not the government's position. The issue, obviously, with P&O Ferries is we're not going to recoil from that. We thought it was wrong, the fire and rehire that we saw, those workers being sacked and then taken back on fewer terms and conditions. But we have changed the law. It was lawful under the Conservative government. It will be unlawful under this Labour government. So where companies accept that, acknowledge that, can work within that framework, we'll, of course, talk to them about investments. And I can tell you they're coming to the summit and the investment will go ahead.
Well, the Shadow Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, Mel Stride, criticised Louise Haigh's comments and the timing of the upcoming summit.
Certainly not on the eve of an investment summit in which that business had at that point pledged to invest £1 billion in the UK economy. And this is a general problem. So this investment summit has been shackled by the fact that, firstly, it's come before a budget, so everybody is wondering what taxes are going to be levied on businesses, and I expect there will be a number, possibly national insurance for employers, which...
The UK is among 40 nations strongly condemning attacks on United Nations peacekeepers in Lebanon. Earlier this week, Israeli troops fired on UN headquarters in southern Lebanon, injuring 2 peacekeepers for the second time in as many days. It comes as Lebanon's health ministry says at least 15 people have been killed in the last day by Israeli airstrikes on 3 different villages. That's after the Israeli military accused Hezbollah of firing over 300 projectiles at Israel. Meanwhile, Hezbollah rocket barrages triggered sirens across northern Israel overnight and early this morning. In Haifa, the 3rd biggest Israeli city and the host of one of the country's biggest naval ports, sirens and explosions blared across the bay. An Israeli army spokesperson said in a statement that 5 projectiles were identified crossing from Lebanon into Israeli territory and were successfully intercepted by the IAF. And finally this afternoon, Elon Musk's SpaceX has caught the Starship rocket booster for the first time ever as it returns to Earth after launch. If you're watching on television, you can see these extraordinary pictures of the liftoff. This is the 5th test of the Starship rocket. SpaceX CEO Elon Musk simply wrote "Good morning" on X after the test made flight history. The Starship has also reportedly performed a successful water landing in the Indian Ocean. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Katie Bowen. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 7 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Coming up, lots of exciting things on the show. We'll bring you more reaction on the news that the former First Minister of Scotland, Alex Salmond, has died at just age 69. Tributes have been flooding in, including from King Charles, who paid tribute to Mr Salmond's devotion to Scotland. Then, in the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, would you have a pylon in your backyard? I've got a poll up right now on X asking you that very question. Ed Miliband seems to have gone crazy over them. Cast your vote now. As Labour begins to hemorrhage the council seats and voter trust despite only being in office for just 100 days, I'll be discussing whether the party's honeymoon period is well and truly over. As ever, send me your thoughts. Post your comments at gbnews.com/your say. So tributes have been continuing to pour in for former First Minister Alex Salmond, who passed away yesterday, aged 69. King Charles said that he was deeply saddened to hear of his passing and paid tribute to his devotion to Scotland. whilst the current First Minister, John Swinney, credited his predecessor with inspiring a generation to believe in Scottish independence. Well, let's head over to Glasgow now to speak to GB News' Scotland reporter, Tony Maguire. Tony, thank you very much for joining me. Now, of course, he was a titan of politics in Scotland. But what's the atmosphere like there? I know there were disagreements in terms of what he believed in, but nobody can deny that he was a real figure in Scottish politics.
Yeah, good afternoon, Nana, that's right. And certainly the language in almost every tribute that's pouring in says something slightly similar, such as he was a colossus, he was a titan, as you so eloquently put there. He was a force to be reckoned with who left a footprint in Scottish politics for multiple generations. It was about 51 years ago he joined the SNP as the party, and about 15 after that he became an MP for the first time, shortly later leading the party, and then we all know what happened after the turn of the millennium. He led Scotland to its first vote for independence, and certainly here on the streets of Glasgow today, talking to people, well, you might just have caught some of those opinions just a few moments ago that, you know, some of those people were telling me that the independence movement has not died with Alex Salmond, but of course today and indeed last night was very much about sending the well wishes to his family. He leaves behind a wife of more than 40 years. And in fact, yesterday in Macedonia, where he suffered that massive heart attack around lunchtime at an event over there, you know, last night there was a memorial for him where the audience was reportedly quite upset. So he was a character that was not just contained within the walls of this nation, and certainly to a lot of people up here in Scotland, irrespective of their political beliefs or their political agendas, he was a huge figure. Certainly, as we talk about the tributes, it was Nicola Sturgeon that said that together they were one of the most successful partnerships in UK politics. And also some warm words from the King. Now, Alex Salmond, obviously quite a staunch Republican. Even he thought an independent Scotland had some sort of place for the monarchy, but the King had said Alex Salmond's devotion to Scotland drove his decades of public service. And of course, the last 10 years, even since that referendum, he has been extremely busy. He went back to Westminster for a spell, a couple of years, representing Gordon, and then he ended up with his own TV show on Russia Today, and then, of course, had that rather harrowing series of court cases where he was eventually cleared of sexually assaulting 9 women. But even that didn't stop him to put his feet up, because he obviously created the Alba Party, and certainly today we've had lots of further tributes coming in from his fellow MPs or former MPs in Alba. Alba, of course, managed to elect nobody at the general election, but it still continues to attract those SNP defectors, and very many of them, I would imagine, were attracted to the party because of Alex Salmond, because, you know, I think it was Andrew Pearce had said that anytime Alex Salmond walks into a room, you know, people come up to him. He's magnetic in terms of that social atmosphere, and very much a light that a lot of people are going to miss in Scottish politics.
Well, listen, Tony, really good to talk to you. Thank you so much for that. That's Tony Maguire. He's there in Scotland. And if you haven't already heard the news, of course, Alex Salmond, former First Minister of Scotland, died yesterday of a big heart attack at the age of just 69. Well, it's just coming up to 12 minutes after 3 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We are Britain's news channel. Now, as part of the new government's plans to meet net zero targets by 2030, Ed Miliband, who's gone pylon mad, has unveiled plans to erect thousands of them across the UK. However, the Energy Secretary's plans have been criticised after an official report found that burying cables underground is actually cheaper in the long run. And this has led to accusations that Mr Miliband is wasting taxpayers' money and needlessly blotting the countryside when more cost-effective alternatives are available. Well, let's discuss that with former CEO of Energy UK, Angela Knight. Angela, thank you very much for joining me. Right, so let's talk about these things. Pylons. Yeah. Is there an issue with them? We hear people talking about electromagnetic fields, things like that, and people who live near pylons get ill and all sorts of things. Has there been any studies that show that they have any detrimental health effects?
Well, no, we've lived with pylons for an awful long time in this country, and it's absolutely right. You know, do you want a pylon in your back garden? Answer no. Is it going to hurt you? Answer no to that as well. I mean, I do appreciate that some people have had and have said that they've got concerns, health concerns relating to pylons. But the reality is, the real problem with pylons is that they're a bit of a blot on the landscape, to say the least. And right now, with the proposal to bring so much wind onshore and down the right-hand side of the country, the east side of the country, if I was in Norfolk or Suffolk or around that area, I would be pretty much part of the big objectors to it to say, find another way. And this report, at long last, has given another way.
Because if he waits a few years, apparently it will be cheaper, and it's probably wiser because these new pylons that they are planning to erect are massive. They're a lot bigger than what we're used to.
Yeah.
My question is this. With regard to things like they're talking about global warming and more flooding, and how effective is a pylon in a flood? Do you know what I mean? If we are seriously trying to save the environment and there are issues with climate change, which could mean we end up with more flooding, are they even safe?
Yes, I think there probably will be, because we've got pylons right now that end up being flooded close to rivers and so on. Now, the critical point here is slightly different, if I may say, Nana. The critical point is this, is that Ed Miliband's trying to get to some form of net zero, certainly much more wind on the system by 2030, means that he's got to take some shortcuts. And those shortcuts are things like these big pylons, and they are not necessary. 2030 is too short a period of time anyway. And the fact that this is a huge engineering change that takes place in this country requires not just proper thinking, but also you've got to take local residents with you. Now, sometimes when I say these things, you know, no doubt you get them as well. People say, I'm a climate denier. Of course I'm not a climate denier. I'm totally in favour of making our environment as clean as possible. But what I'm not in favour of doing is making and putting in place a system that doesn't work properly, that hasn't got the backup, that's not as efficient as it should be, is extremely costly, and is an eyesore just to meet a date which a series of policy wonks have gone and put in the diary.
Yeah. And I heard that we actually waste about 55% of that energy that's produced anyway. And if we became more efficient in that, then the network that he's suggesting would probably be slightly obsolete. Is that true?
Well, the point about wasting energy is that we can have days where there's a lot of wind at a time of day in which we're not using the power. So what that means is that you're producing electricity which isn't needed, and that's when the windmills get shut or whatever, and there's a payment that's made to people who have these wind farms in compensation. And it, of course, is more complicated when you've got a very large number of wind farms. The wind suddenly starts, then it suddenly stops again. And so you have a more complicated and more disruptive system in the first place. And there's no easy way, really, of storing electricity. Yeah, you can pump water on hills, you can have batteries and whatnot, but this is huge amount of power, and that would mean a huge amount of ways of storing electricity, all of which have another sort of physical requirement around them. You're better to have a balanced system where you've got some steady backup, which is there, which you can pull in, where you've got an amount of wind which your system can cater for. You've got some solar. We're not a very sunny country, but some solar. You've got some nuclear backup. You've got some gas. So you have a mixture. You're not overly reliant in one direction or another. And right now we're heading to a situation in which we will be reliant on imported electricity, and therefore hugely exposed to what is happening in the market across Europe. And we all tend to be warm and cold at the same time. So it bothers me that this broader thinking is not being brought to bear on this. And when you come back to this report, which effectively says take a slightly longer period of time to 2034 rather than 2030, then not only can we get the cables buried and so nothing like the eyesore that they are at the moment, but also we can do it at a cheaper cost. There's probably some other more engineering complexities in it than that, but in effect, what it says is this is a true option. Let's go for the true option on a reasoned timetable.
Right. Well, let's hope he's listening and watching this, Angela. Thank you very much. That's Angela Nunn. She's the former CEO of Energy UK. So what do you think? Would you like a pylon in your backyard? You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, we'll be debating whether Labour's honeymoon period is well and truly over, and as the party begins to hemorrhage council seats in voted trucks. But next, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, would you have a pylon in your backyard? This is GB News.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Young adults spend a few years living away from home at university, those who go to university, but many then have no choice but to move back in with their parents because of the rising cost of renting.
But is this an excuse, and are Gen Z or Z just being lazy?
I mean, what do you make of it, Debbie? Because we do have to have some sympathy, don't we, in that, you know, rents are very high, it's very hard to get a mortgage, there are issues there.
I think the push towards young people to go to university as well is not necessarily the right thing for a lot of people, and I think people should start work early. These guys leave their universities with a huge amount of debt, no jobs, or huge rent, you know what I mean? It's just ridiculous. So I think we've got to look at the work ethic and start it younger. Because I think it's so easy just to move back with your mum and dad, isn't it?
To speak like a Gen Zer, they would say that, well, it's OK for your generation, you had it easy.
Realistically, that isn't quite that true, because a lot of people then didn't go to university. This is a relatively new thing that everybody goes to university.
I have to say, what strikes me today is that you still have, amongst all these problems, not having enough money, going to university when perhaps you shouldn't be, all these sort of issues, you still get all these people saying, well, I'm going to have a year out.
Yeah, I agree with you entirely. And I think the thing is, they say, oh, it was easy for you, but it wasn't really. We still had to rent places.
But the thing is with this debate, Debbie, is the generation we're talking about, Gen Z, who we're accusing of being lazy, have been raised by our generation.
Yeah.
So what have we done wrong that, if they are lazier, has made them like that?
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Good afternoon. Welcome to GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. The laughter that you can hear. And my panellists, Danny Kelly and also Jonathan Liss. We were just talking, Jonathan was saying about that you can see his bald patch on this side. And then Danny just said you can see his.
That's right. I am honestly never saying anything in your presence again because you're so interested. Yes, off camera.
Yes, but everyone can hear you.
Everyone in the studio, not everyone back home.
Oh, be quiet, Jonathan. Well, you can't see mine because it's covered with this. I'm bald underneath this. You'll never see it, ever. Right. Right, so it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, would you have a pylon in your backyard? Not the social media kind either. Listen,
I've had those in my backyard before.
As well.
Euphemisms everywhere.
I know, it's terrible, isn't it? Let's not go too far with it. As part of the new government's plans to meet net zero targets by 2030, Ed Miliband has unveiled plans to erect thousands of these pylons, these unsightly, ugly things across the UK. However, the Energy Secretary's plans have been criticised after an official report in East Anglia Network here that the large-scale pylon rollout from Norwich to Tilbury is planned. And they found that burying cables is actually cheaper in the long term. Now, this has obviously led to people accusing Mr Miliband of pursuing a dogmatic pylon agenda that wastes taxpayers' money. I mean, it's our money. You see, this is what he forgets as he's standing there talking about the pylons. We're paying for it, buddy. Just because you have a majority, these things are going to needlessly block the countryside when more cost-effective alternatives are clearly available. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, would you have a pylon in your backyard? Joining me now to discuss, broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly and political commentator Jonathan Liss. I'm going to start with you, Danny Kelly.
I wouldn't want an erected pylon in my backyard. For all the tea in China. No way. And I'm intransigent with that view. I was reading before the show, Ed Miliband is the only person in the UK, when he was asked, would you like to... The word is like. Would you like to live next to a pylon? And that's an important word, like, because it's all... Ed Miliband is the only individual in the UK who actually wants to live next to a pylon.
He needs to be moved next door to one.
And there was a Lincolnshire farmer who actually offered to sell him her house. It's like, if you want to live near a pylon so much, then come and buy my house.
Yeah, exactly, because that's another problem. As soon as they erect that near your house
plummets in value.
Yeah.
Who wants to live next to a pylon? No one actually wants to. You know, everybody's a NIMBY. Not in my backyard. I take you back to my earlier position.
Yeah.
Everybody's a NIMBY. I don't want to live next to a pylon. I don't want to live next to a traveller's site. I don't want to live next to a nuclear power plant. I'm just a normal, average sort of bloke. And there's an alternative to big swathes of the countryside in East Anglia. And I'm not anywhere near East Anglia, but I feel for the residents of East Anglia.
Jonathan Liss.
I never thought that I'd hear the words dogmatic pylon agenda. It sounds like sort of three random words as we put next to each other. Look, I find it hard to get particularly vexed about this topic.
Why?
If I'm honest with you. Because I can see both sides, which is obviously absolute kryptonite for a political panel. But obviously we need to develop our energy infrastructure. It's a matter of urgency. We need to be a lot more energy self-sufficient in this country. So obviously we need pylons. And
why? When you can have cables. They said if you wait for a few years...
Sorry, what I mean is obviously we need some kind of cable to transport the electricity. Now, if the government has decided that this is the most efficient way, then no one wants a pylon in their backyard, obviously.
No.
I certainly... Apart from Ed Miliband, maybe.
Lying.
But obviously, I suppose it's an important point in the sense that when you have big infrastructure projects, there are always going to be people who are inconvenienced, sometimes very seriously inconvenienced in the short term. But if those views were always the ones that carry the day, then we wouldn't have a rail network in this country. Yeah, we wouldn't have any kind of electricity or any kind of energy infrastructure.
But when you hear that there may well be an alternative that will be 600 million or so less, which, if he waited a few years, could do the job and actually would probably stop all this upset.
Yes.
That's why it's a dogmatic.
That's why I say that I can see both sides, because having said all that, if it actually turns out there is a cheaper approach that might be cheaper in the long term, but would actually breach the government's deadline, I think that's the problem, because it would take until 2034, I think, so 2030. If I were in the energy department, I'd be looking closely at that, because if it kind of solves the problem and is a bit cheaper, takes a little bit longer, but also alleviates the concerns of those residents, then it kind of feels like
also it's our money. I mean, it's our money. It's the taxpayers' money.
But also, a lot of people will be sitting here watching the telly thinking it's just so futile. This is just completely academic because of the amount of CO2 that, as a country, we're responsible for pumping out. I think we're preaching to the converted.
I think you've got to be realistic with that. The only reason why our CO2 limit looks small is because we offset it in China. So we've lost our manufacturing base in this country. So the Chinese will make that. In fact, they'll probably even make the steel for the pylons.
So we can feel good about ourselves.
Well, they'll probably make the steel for the pylons because we've got rid of all our coal mines now, so we can't make virgin steel.
Yeah, I mean, we do a lot. It's ingrained in our culture now about trying to save the planet and the environment. And then you've got countries like, I'm going to say America, almost, per capita. America spews out CO2. And then, of course, you've got the old favourites, China, for example, who've got a billion people.
No one says that we can do this on our own, but we also have to do our bit. I think that's the thing.
But I think we're doing our bit.
Yes.
And I think that this is unnecessary and it's causing a lot of grief for so many people in East Anglia.
Well, look, we have a net zero commitment in this country. It's something that is bipartisan. It's something that Labour is committed to. It's been voted on a platform to deliver that. So I think there's absolutely no problem with trying to deliver that plan. The way is how to do that the most responsibly, considerately and cheaply.
Well, why 2030 anyway? I mean, look, it's 2024. They will only get 5 years at the maximum, which will be 2029.
Who, Labour?
Labour. If they carry on as they are, there's no way they're coming back in power. Only because it's a disaster.
The leader of the opposition.
Well, no, you've got also reform, and there are, to be honest.
Well, there's a world of things that could happen.
Well, there's lots of things that could happen, but the bottom line is this: do you actually think that that's the right way forward anyway? Is it not better to create localised power so that everyone has, say, solar panels on their home? You could have, I don't know whether you could have a windmill or whatever it is, or other things, rather than this forcing us to all be connected to this massive grid so that those companies can just take money off us.
I wouldn't want solar panels on my house. They're another...
Oh, on your own house?
Yeah, I don't want solar panels. It's very expensive. But I bet you if the government... Just don't forget about 10, 15 years ago, the government rolled out loads of subsidies to try and get people involved with solar panels. I dare say maybe 5% of houses. This is just a figure.
But you still have to be connected to the grid, and then what they would give you is money back.
You can sell it back to the grid.
But it shouldn't be that way. You should be able to... Your home should be set up so you can power it literally on its own.
We need a centralised infrastructure in this country. We need to have, obviously, a national grid and ways of connecting the entire country. Obviously, there are people who live off the grid
more localised. So the grids are more localised, rather than, Scotland having the wind farms, that then their energy is transported all the way to East Anglia. They need to be more localised centres rather than it's one wide thing.
Big hubs?
Yeah, hubs locally.
Regional,
but that will require massive government investment in infrastructure. The word that we're sort of darting around in a bit is investment, because we are so fixated as a country with day-to-day spending. We just don't think about the long term. We have to be more long term in our planning all the time.
All right. Well, listen, thank you very much. So, Jonathan Liss, and also, I've forgotten who you are, Danny Kelly. It's coming up to 31 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. After the break, we'll continue with the Great British Debates, and we'll be discussing whether Labour's honeymoon period is well and truly over, as the party are now hemorrhaging council seats and losing voter trust. First, let's get your latest news headlines with Katie Bowen.
Nana, thank you. It's just gone 3:30. These are your latest headlines from the GB newsroom. The King says he's greatly saddened by the sudden death of Alex Salmond, the former First Minister of Scotland. The Alba Party leader died yesterday afternoon, aged 69, from a suspected heart attack during a trip to North Macedonia. Mr Salmond had made a speech at the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy Forum and is understood to have collapsed at a lunch in a crowded room. There will be a post-mortem examination to confirm the cause of death. Robert Jenrick says he'll make Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg chairman of the Conservative Party if he triumphs against Kemi Badenoch in the party leadership contest. Mr Jenrick told GB News this morning that Jacob has been a tireless campaigner for the grassroots and he understands better than anyone the need for party reform.
I want to have a different way to select candidates, so we end the favoured sons and daughters of the leader being parachuted in. That was a disgrace.
Yes.
I want to stop members just getting emails asking for money but never asking what do they want and where do they want the party to go. Let's build a mass membership, democratic organisation. I think Jacob will be a great asset to that.
Jonathan Reynolds says it's not the government's position that P&O Ferries is a rogue operator, despite a press release this week calling them a rogue employer. P&O Ferries' owner, DP World, will attend the International Investment Summit tomorrow. They had previously threatened to pull out of the event and a £1 billion port investment. That's after Transport Secretary Louise Haigh criticised their employment strategy and called for a boycott. The operator was criticised by politicians from both main parties in March 2022 when it suddenly sacked 800 British seafarers and replaced them with cheaper, mainly overseas staff, saying it was necessary to stave off bankruptcy. The business secretary told GB News' Camilla Tominey that the £1 billion investment will go ahead.
Particularly on this issue, that's not the government's position. The issue, obviously, with P&O Ferries is we're not going to recoil from that. We thought it was wrong, the fire and rehire that we saw, those workers being sacked and then taken back on fewer terms and conditions. But we have changed the law. It was lawful under the Conservative government. It will be unlawful under this Labour government. So where companies accept that, acknowledge that, can work within that framework, we'll, of course, talk to them about investments. And I can tell you they're coming to the summit and the investment will go ahead.
And finally, for now, nearly 500 migrants crossed the English Channel in one day. New figures released by the Home Office today show 471 migrants crossed the Channel on 9 small boats yesterday. The latest arrivals bring the total so far this year to just over 27,200. A Home Office spokesman insists they're committed to dismantling people smuggling operations, saying the government will stop at nothing to bring these criminals to justice. Those are your latest GB News headlines for now. I am Katie Bowen. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon and welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Still chilly through this afternoon, particularly down the east coast, but we will start to see some rain and some cloud arriving from the west, and it will begin to turn a little bit milder. But at first, still got a high pressure, so fairly calm conditions across particularly the eastern half of the UK. But as we head through this evening, developing a southerly wind, and we've got these frontal systems arriving from the west. So that rain arriving from the west, thickening cloud across the far north, and we'll start to see some particularly heavy outbursts of rain across parts of Devon and Cornwall and parts of Wales through this evening as well. The winds picking up here particularly as well, turning quite blustery overnight as that rain moves slowly eastwards. Milder under the southerly airflow, temperatures into the double figures, but still cool across the far north into the single figures again here, and still a chilly start to the day on Monday. But as we head further south, we do still have this rain lingering on through Monday morning, so quite a grey and damp start to the day. Quite difficult driving conditions for the rush hour, a little bit drier the further west that you go, and some bright sunshine to start the day across Northern Ireland. Similarly, there'll be some brighter sunny spells across parts of Scotland, but across the far northwest, still holding on to this area of rain as well. Through the rest of the day, that rain will slowly start to move away, and we will start to see something a little bit drier across the southern half of the UK, but it will hold on to the cloud through much of Monday. You'll still be holding on to that quite grey and perhaps drizzly conditions on perhaps some coast and over some high ground. But for Northern Ireland, the far north of England and Scotland, there will be some decent sunny spells around. Temperatures here will be a touch higher than we saw on Sunday, and across the south milder, although still fairly cloudy, so those temperatures perhaps not feeling quite as warm. Heading through this evening, it's still holding on to a fairly cloudy picture across the southern half of the UK. Further north still, they're going to have these clearer spells developing as well. Through Tuesday, most places will be staying dry, but we start to see some wet weather moving in through Wednesday. That's all from me. Catch you later.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark meets at My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I laugh.
Welcome back. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. 37 minutes after 3 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. Lots of you have been getting in touch with your comments. I felt really sad for Jonathan on this one. Richard said Jonathan Liss has a terrible laugh also. So he's obviously said something else. I think you've got a cute laugh.
I'll just go to the Kamala Harris defence. So laughter is a sign of joy, and I'll never apologise for having joy.
Very good, absolutely. And also
It certainly beats the alternative on this channel.
Exactly. And obviously, Kamala Harris, I think she's a bit mad anyway. Sorry. All right. Yeah, what else have we got? Oh, Zavian. That's a nice name. Zavian, is it? He says, look up Ed Miliband for treason. Cancel net zero. Rebuild all power stations that have recently been shut down or demolished. Do it this way because all the pylons are already in place.
Nana, can we just backtrack a bit? Has someone literally messaged this channel to call for a cabinet minister to be locked up for treason?
Yes.
I think we have to put this into perspective. He's not just tried to assassinate the king or to sort of stage a coup against the government. He's part of the government. But he's not an enemy of the state. He has a different political vision from your viewer. It's not treason, it's political disagreement.
I don't know.
Please, let's get some perspective.
All right, well, there you go. Thank you for that, Jonathan. Right, also David. Now, David Metcalf, he says that he's a retired electrical engineer, and I asked about pylons and whether they're dangerous for health. He said, good afternoon, Nana. That is not correct about pylons and electromagnetic force. The government actually set up exposure guidelines after it found years ago that electromagnetic fields, or EMFs, emitted by pylons. A lot of investigations findings were buried. Some studies actually found that power lines may cause health effects such as childhood leukemia and brain tumours. To bury cables means that the CSA, or cross-section area, has to be increased massively due to the heat given by the cables. Hence why cables are hung between pylons, so the free-flowing air cools them down. It also depends what material you use for copper cables, aluminium, etc. They all have different properties. If you take time to get close to a pylon, you can actually hear the cables buzzing. Yes, I have taken time and I have heard it.
I think that we have to be really clear that those claims about leukemia have no...
They've been debunked.
Completely debunked. There's no evidence bavided up by scientific study at all.
Well, this is what David is saying. But, yeah, I'm with you on that. I haven't heard that as a thing.
The house prices thing is true, though.
Yes, but I think we have to be really careful. These are it's like the 5G conspiracy theory. It's just they're not rooted in
All right, well, he said, what do I know? I'm an electrical engineer. So, you know, thank you for that anyway. Really good to get your comments.
Doctor,
retired, though.
No, he's retired, yeah, but he will know a lot. But I'm wondering about that as well. Right, keep them coming. gbnews.com/your say. Right now, as the Labour Party passes 100 days in government, there are increasing signs that their honeymoon period is well and truly over. And not only have the party lost several council by-elections over the past week, but new polling by Savanta makes for grim reading for the Labour leadership. So Keir Starmer's net favourability ratings have fallen by 28 points since the end of July, reaching -13. And in addition, 39% of those polled said that the general competence and trust in government has fallen under Labour, and fewer than half of Labour voters polled say the country has improved since they took over. So let's discuss with broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, also political commentator Jonathan Liss. Jonathan, it's undeniable that Keir Starmer's popularity is shrivelling and that people are not happy with the Labour Party, even those who voted for them.
Yeah, I think it's not uncontroversial to say that things haven't been plain sailing for the last 3 months, and a lot of mistakes have been made. But that doesn't mean that that's all that's happened. I think the main stories have been the stories of cut through have been winter fuel, which is entirely an unforced error, an own goal by the Labour Party. I'll say that quite openly. And the freebies thing, which is partly sort of the media going in on something, partly a complacency and lack of care on the part of the Labour Party, and a failure of political skill and communication skill. The political skill, they didn't see how it would be seen. They didn't sort of see the optics of it, and they didn't.
You don't think they saw, like, Yvette Cooper and Ed Balls taking Taylor Swift tickets, and then suddenly there's some sort of blue light to get
all the things to be upset about in this whole issue, that is one of the very last ones, because
there's also a football one as well, isn't there?
But the problem that you have with all this stuff, which we've talked about in the past, is that whenever you have a political system that invites donations from powerful people, and there happens to be some kind of related appointment by someone about that person or people related to that person, then there are questions around sort of conflicts of interest. So, you know, the alternative to that is having a political system where we don't have any donations or very, very capped donations by powerful people, and we have a publicly funded model.
But that's not really
a
donation. These are individuals taking freebies for specific things. That's not a donation to the party.
And also, don't forget, he gave a load of dough back to Lord Ali, didn't he? If ever that was a sign of doing something wrong, it was actually giving, I think it was 6
I don't think it's a sign of doing wrong. It's a sign of the optics.
Acceptance that he shouldn't have done it, otherwise he wouldn't have
But he didn't admit that there was anything wrong with that. He's just doing it for the optics.
I'm talking about people's perception. And people will perceive that he's done something wrong because he gave back money. Whether it's accurate that he gave back money for that reason or not, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the perception, because we're asking the question, why have people abandoned Labour? Jonathan's right, the winter fuel allowance, I think people find that unforgivable, but also a lot of Labour voters will have abandoned the party because they were smeared as being far right when they took part in protests.
There were riots, Sonny.
No, allow me to finish the sentence. That took part in protests that disgracefully turned into riots. Now, you have to be naive to assume that everybody who took part in those riots were far right. If you've ever been to Goodison Park, the home of Everton, in the 1980s and 90s, black players and black fans were screamed at by thousands of Scousers. Scousers, generally speaking, are Labour supporters. And for people just to assume that you've got a problem with undocumented individuals coming into the country, being put into your community, working class areas of Liverpool, for example, then taking part in protests that turned into riots, that all of those individuals were right-wingers and far right, then it's just wrong. You know, you can be racist and be a Labour supporter.
I think later on they acknowledge that not everyone's far right.
But people will remember that.
Honestly, I say this with no sort of partisan bias, but I really don't think that is one of the things that is affecting Labour's poll ratings right now.
You don't think that?
No, absolutely not. I think that actually the public were quite supportive of Starmer's handling of the riots, and that it's this we've heard constantly. I've heard on this channel many times the falsehood that Starmer smeared all those who are worried about migration as far right. He did no such thing. He said that people who went to torch an asylum hotel and who threw bricks at mosques were far right. I don't think it's. We can debate the ins and outs, but I don't think it's. That's not going to be objected. It's not going to be objected to by the majority of the people in this country.
If those things happened in Liverpool, believe me, they were probably Labour voters. You can be racist to be a Labour voter.
It doesn't actually. I don't think that Labour will mind losing the votes to people who throw bricks at mosques.
But that's not my point. My point is that they were smeared as being far right, initially taking part in peaceful protests, and people remembered that.
Well, okay, fine. But I don't think it's a big point in this overall depiction of why Labour's losing. I think that Labour, it's about communications. It's about a failure to actually tell a story about what Labour's done.
But Jonathan, isn't that communication right there, that making that connection with anybody who does this, calling them far right, and then giving people a perception that most people who are complaining about this are then far right? That is, again, a communication issue if they didn't mean it that way.
No.
See, and I think that's what was read into it by a lot of the British public.
No, I really don't think so.
But that's only one of the things.
But I really don't think it's. I really don't think on that particular issue Labour did a bad thing.
All right. Well, let's move on from that issue. Is there anything else that you think that Labour have done that has really caused this?
The winter fuel allowance.
Yeah,
Jonathan was right.
One.
I think that's the big one. The winter fuel
also
allowance.
The VAT on private schools as well, even though people knew they were going to do it.
No.
Even though people knew they were going to do it, they hoped that they would.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure that will affect Labour's votes.
I think it might do, because of the teachers who would lose their jobs and the unions.
Well, potentially, I think as a mum and a dad of someone who's going to send their child to a private school, are they the archetypal Labour voter? I don't know. I wouldn't think they would be. Maybe.
Listen, I've got to go on this. We'll carry on with this. There's so much more in there. I mean, we could literally talk about this for days, couldn't we? Because there's so much there. It's difficult to decide what to not include. But stay tuned. Send me your thoughts. gbnews.com/your say. But next, it's time for Worldview. I'll be joined by Uri Geller, who will give us the latest on the war in the Middle East. Stay tuned.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight, every night from 11 p.m.
Some controversial film news. Someone has hired an actor who's white. What the hell is going on?
Let me just fix my hair. Let me just come on. So, Wuthering Heights film stirs controversy after white actor, he's white, chosen to play Heathcliff.
Is that your Humza Yusuf impersonation?
That is, yes, that's my Chinese accent. Experts have gone, oh no, there's a lot of, in recent years, he's definitely black or mixed race because he was found in Liverpool. And as you know, everybody in Liverpool is black or mixed race.
No, I mean, have you read the novel?
God, no.
Right, well, I have. And the novel itself does say, quite explicitly, that he is dark-skinned. Yeah. That the implication is that he's of Romani origin. So he wouldn't be whiter than white, you know. So, I mean...
that's fine. Yeah.
So I wouldn't say that casting... But on the other hand...
This guy's Spanish. His origin's Spanish.
Do you remember when there was a black Anne Boleyn for a Channel 5 miniseries? That seems to be more egregious, because, I tell you what, Anne Boleyn definitely wasn't black.
You racist. No, I almost feel sorry in this story because you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't now. Because if they'd have, it's not like he's a bit of an anti-hero, right? It's not like a good all-round.
He's not a good guy.
So if you go, right, we definitely need to cast someone black for this. What? Why are you picking just black people to play someone with so many character flaws? Or you go, why?
Like they did with Darth Vader.
Yes, that's right.
He was played by the Green Cross Code Man. Okay. Just the voice was done by...
That's true. Yeah. Yes, it was the Green Cross Code Man. I wonder what they were saying there.
Have you ever seen the videos of the original audio Star Wars?
No.
So you've got... I can't remember his name, but you've got the Green Cross Code Man going like, I find your lack of faith disturbing. Yeah. No, Luke, I am your father.
They should have left it as it was.
This is the difference to me. We're talking about Star Wars. You're like, oh, have you read Bronte, Wuthering, whatever?
She only wrote one novel, Josh. You could... do with the courtesy of reading it.
I'll read it straight after I finish your one.
And it's actually brilliant.
The People's Channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
It's like having Donald Trump present his show.
Fine, you've only missed an hour. There's 2 more hours left, so it's all good. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We are Britain's news channel, and it's time now for World View, where I bring you the latest from around the world. Let's get an update on developments in Israel, on the war in the Middle East. Joining me now live from Tel Aviv is performer and mystifier Uri Geller. Uri, lovely to see you. What's been happening there? What's on your mind?
OK, look, Nana, always great to be on your show. And let me tell you why. GB News, and I'm talking about your show, Nana, is really the only channel which covers both sides of the war here in Israel. No doubt, it is a terrible situation in Lebanon and Gaza, terrible. But here in Israel, we're also under attack constantly, day in, day out, day and night. In a moment, I will show you on my phone, you will see rocket warnings. It doesn't stop. These are Hezbollah rockets being fired at Israel all the time. All the time. This morning, hundreds of missiles. Now, before I show you, please understand, if a siren goes off right now while I'm talking to you, I will have just seconds to get to a bomb shelter. And millions of Israelis have to do the same. Don't forget, Hamas and Hezbollah started this war. They attacked us. They attacked us first. But right now, Nana, we're waiting to see what is going to happen with Iran. Remember, days ago, Iran attacked Israel with around 200 ballistic missiles. It was a complete miracle that only one person tragically was killed. And believe it or not, that happened to be a Palestinian man. So Iran succeeded in killing the very side it is pretending to support. Now, here, let me show you my red alert on my telephone. which shows missiles being launched into Israel, into different towns and cities. Let me activate it and watch this now. Look at this, Nana. I'm trying to bring it close up. These are missiles coming in. Look, Nana, Israel is going to retaliate any day. And when it does, it should destroy this evil Iranian regime. We need to use everything we have to destroy all of Iran's nuclear facilities. Look, rockets are still coming in. We need to wipe out the IRGC. That's Iran's terrorist army. And yes, the Ayatollah himself should end his days at the tip of an Israeli missile. And this is still going on. Now, let's go to another subject. Let's go to the BBC. This is something I'm so angry about, Nana. Did you know that last week the BBC gave 45 minutes of airtime to the Ayatollah? That's right. The BBC broadcast live Ayatollah Khamenei's speech where he justified the 7th of October attacks. He praised Hezbollah and he said in that speech, Israel should disappear from the Middle East. Look, Nana, the BBC should not live stream a speech by Mother Teresa, let alone this modern day Hitler. It is an absolute disgrace. It is outrageous. And it is another low, very low for the BBC. The BBC, listen to me, all of you GB viewers, the BBC should apologize to the whole of the British public whose license, your license fee they spend on doing this. You guys, girls, everyone, you're paying for this. That's all I have to say, Nana. I'm outraged at the BBC. I don't want to say that the rude word, but F the BBC.
Oh, Uri Geller, apologies for that. Uri Geller, thank you very much. There he is live from Tel Aviv. Apologies to that, of course. You know, I think the BBC did apologise. I think there was a message there. We'll have a look and find a statement with regard to that. But, of course, we apologise for any language. But those are Uri's thoughts. He's very passionate about that. He is currently under fire as he's there in Israel live. Coming up, my niggle on Caribbean nations demanding £200 billion in reparations from the UK for our role in the slave trade. But now, though, let's get some weather with Amy Bokota.
A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon and welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Still chilly through this afternoon, particularly down the east coast, but we will start to see some rain and some cloud arriving from the west, and it will begin to turn a little bit milder. But at first, still got a high pressure, so fairly calm conditions across particularly the eastern half of the UK. But as we head through this evening, developing a southerly wind, and we've got these frontal systems arriving from the west. So that rain arriving from the west, thickening cloud across the far north, and we'll start to see some particularly heavy outbursts of rain across parts of Devon and Cornwall and parts of Wales through this evening as well. The winds picking up here particularly as well, turning quite blustery overnight as that rain moves slowly eastwards. Milder under the southerly airflow, temperatures into the double figures, but still cool across the far north into the single figures again here, and still a chilly start to the day on Monday. But as we head further south, we do still have this rain lingering on through Monday morning, so quite a grey and damp start to the day. Quite difficult driving conditions for the rush hour. A little bit drier the further west that you go, and some bright sunshine to start the day across Northern Ireland. Similarly, there'll be some brighter sunny spells across parts of Scotland, but across the far northwest, still holding onto this area of rain as well. Through the rest of the day, that rain will slowly start to move away, and we will start to see something a little bit drier across the southern half of the UK, but it will hold onto the cloud through much of Monday. You'll still be holding onto that quite grey and perhaps drizzly conditions on perhaps some coast and over some high ground. But for Northern Ireland, the far north of England and Scotland, there will be some decent sunny spells around. Temperatures here will be a touch higher than we saw on Sunday, and across the south milder, although still fairly cloudy, so those temperatures perhaps not feeling quite as warm. Heading through this evening, it's still holding on to a fairly cloudy picture across the southern half of the UK. Further north still, they're going to have these clearer spells developing as well. Through Tuesday, most places will be staying dry, but we start to see some wet weather moving in through Wednesday. That's all from me. Catch you later.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Luck.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date. Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about.
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. It's just gone 4 o'clock and it's coming up for the next 2 hours. Me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today, it's broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, also political commentator Jonathan Liss. On the way, Energy Secretary Ed Miliband's gone pylon mad, even though there is a suggestion that if he waited a few years, cables underground would potentially be cheaper, saving the British taxpayer money. Ed Miliband is trying to push ahead with his pylon plan. So would you be happy with the pylon in your backyard? I've got a poll up right now on X asking you that question. Then in my niggle, which is coming up next, the King and Sir Keir Starmer face demands to pay £200 billion in reparations over Britain's role in the transatlantic slave trade. But should they cough up the compensation, really? Then the interview, I'm joined by fashion designer extraordinaire Jeff Banks. He's going to be here live to talk about his remarkable career from dressing Annie Lennox to his friendship with Vivienne Westwood. He's done it all. You won't want to miss that. He'll be here live. Then, of course, Supplement Sunday is on the way. But before we get started, let's get your latest news with Katie Bowen.
Nana, thank you and good afternoon. It's just gone 4 o'clock. These are your latest headlines from the GB newsroom. The King says he's greatly saddened by the sudden death of Alex Salmond, former First Minister of Scotland. The Alba leader died yesterday afternoon, aged 69, from a suspected heart attack during a trip to North Macedonia. Mr Salmond had made a speech at the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy Forum and is understood to have collapsed at a lunch in a crowded room. People in Scotland have been reacting to his death.
His passing is a great shock. And I think for most Scots, whatever their opinions, it's sad. He was a pillar of the independence movement.
I think he'll be remembered as the man that nearly got Scotland independence.
Well, he nearly got us independence, but, you know, nearly's not good enough.
I couldn't believe it, to be honest. I was shocked. I don't even know how he died yet, I'm not sure. I met him years ago when he was he was walking around Swinton Crescent in Baillieston and he was handing out leaflets and that and he played me at pool.
He's a good man, very good man.
Yeah, very good man. Done his best for Scotland, you know.
Alex Salmond, who died yesterday. Elsewhere, Robert Jenrick says he'll make Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg chairman of the Conservative Party if he triumphs against Kemi Badenoch in the party leadership contest. As chairman, Sir Jacob, who lost his seat at the general election, will be put in charge of the party's campaigning operations. Mr Jenrick told GB News this morning that Jacob has been a tireless campaigner for the grassroots and he understands better than anyone the need for party reform.
I want to have a different way to select candidates, so we end the favoured sons and daughters of the leader being parachuted in. That was a disgrace.
Yes.
I want to stop members just getting emails asking for money but never asking what do they want and where do they want the party to go. Let's build a mass membership, democratic organisation. I think Jacob will be a great asset to that.
Jonathan Reynolds says it's not the government's position that P&O Ferries is a rogue operator, despite a press release this week calling them a rogue employer. P&O Ferries' owner, DP World, will attend the International Investment Summit tomorrow. They had previously threatened to pull out of the event and a £1 billion port investment. That's after the Transport Secretary, Louise Haigh, criticised their employment strategy and called for a boycott. The operator was criticised by politicians from both main parties in March 2022, when it suddenly sacked 800 British seafarers and replaced them with cheaper, mainly overseas staff, saying it was necessary to stave off bankruptcy. The business secretary told GB News' Camilla Tominey that the £1 billion investment will go ahead.
Quickly on this issue, that's not the government's position. The issue, obviously, with P&O Ferries is we're not going to recoil from that. We thought it was wrong, the fire and rehire that we saw, those workers being sacked and then taken back on fewer terms and conditions. But we have changed the law. It was lawful under the Conservative government. It will be unlawful under this Labour government. So where companies accept that, acknowledge that, can work within that framework, we'll, of course, talk to them about investments. And I can tell you they're coming to the summit and the investment will go ahead.
Nearly 500 migrants have made the crossing of the English Channel to the UK in one day. New figures released by the Home Office today show 471 migrants crossed the Channel on 9 small boats yesterday. The latest arrivals bring the total so far this year to just over 27,200. A Home Office spokesman insists they're committed to dismantling people smuggling operations, saying the government will stop at nothing to bring these criminals to justice. UN authorities in Lebanon have said this afternoon that 15 peacekeepers have been injured due to the actions of Israeli military in what they call a shocking violation after Israeli tanks also destroyed their main gate. It comes as the UK is among 40 nations strongly condemning attacks on United Nations peacekeepers in Lebanon. Lebanon's health ministry says at least 15 people have been killed in the last day by Israeli airstrikes on 3 different villages. Israeli military say around 115 rockets have been fired from Lebanon into Israel today. Hezbollah rocket barrages triggered sirens across northern Israel overnight and into today. And just briefly this afternoon, former US President Donald Trump, who is the Republican presidential candidate, said he spoke with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu 2 days ago. Trump made the comments in a Fox News interview that aired earlier today. And finally this afternoon, Elon Musk's SpaceX has caught the Starship rocket booster for the first time ever as it returns to Earth after launch. If you're watching on television, you can see these extraordinary pictures of the liftoff. This is the 5th test of the Starship rocket. SpaceX CEO Elon Musk has simply wrote "Good morning" on X after the test made flight history. The Starship has also reportedly performed a successful water landing in the Indian Ocean. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Katie Bowen. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
It's 7 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I am so sick of this conversation, but here it goes. Reparations. King Charles and Sir Keir Starmer are set to face a demand that the UK pays £200 billion in compensation for its role in the transatlantic slave trade. 15 Caribbean governments have decided to put slavery reparations on the table at the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Samoa later this month. Of course they have. Who doesn't like being given pots of money because they believe they've been wronged? UN Judge Patrick Robinson even called the 200 billion figure an underestimation of the damage caused by the trade. He said that he was amazed that countries involved in slavery think that they can bury their heads in the sand on the issue, and stated once a state has committed a wrongful act, it's obliged to pay reparations. You know what this is, don't you? They've seen how woeful and weak our government is. They've watched Foreign Secretary David Lammy flippantly hand back the Chagos Islands, Labour using their vast majority to get policies through unchallenged. And these countries have thought, we're onto something here. David Lammy has also in the past said that he would take the responsibility of being the first Foreign Secretary descended from the slave trade incredibly seriously. He said that his Guyanese parents would not have believed their skinny son in NHS prescription glasses who got stopped and searched on the streets of Tottenham could end up reaching the Foreign Office. Sorry, but this sounds a little bit like we're in sort of chip-on-shoulder territory. That's just my view. David also tweeted, in 1833, Parliament passed the Slavery Abolition Act, £17 billion of compensation to slave owners for the loss of their property. My ancestors, the slaves, received no reparations. Some people simply do not know their history or do not want to know hard truths. OK, let me give you some hard truths, David. Even if we were to agree to reparations, who do we pay? Just because my skin is considered black doesn't mean I am one of the wronged party. This country is also full of people from all nations. Should they contribute to the pot paid just because they live and work in the UK? I mean, where do you think the money's going to come from? And for those receiving the funds, for all we know, they might be descendants of slave owners, because the trade did not happen without the cooperation of many from those very nations demanding the reparations. Unless we're all prepared to take a DNA test first so we can work out what our actual ancestry is and whether they were friend or foe to the trade, or whether many demanding reparations are in fact even Caribbean, then how do we ascertain who gets what? You see, the problem with this is that not all Caribbeans are innocent. Being black doesn't make it so. Many benefited from the slave trade, and to carte blanche blame it on the UK and demand a ludicrous sum is frankly naive. And I don't see why I, as a Ghanaian descendant born in Newcastle, living in the UK, should pay a penny towards it. And whilst the slave trade was an abhorrent, vile business, it brought some benefits to those nations. Have you factored that into the calculation, David? Ironically, it's not black and white. So what is it, the history of slavery reparation demands? Right, I'm joined now by author and historian Martin Whittock. Martin, welcome to the programme. So, Martin, lovely to have you on board. So, Martin, talk to me. Why is there this constant demand from different nations for reparations when really it's almost impossible to work out what to give whom, if there is any blame to be attributed?
Well, as you say, it's certainly very, very complicated. But just to give people some sort of background in this, the moral and economic case that is made is that by the beginning of the 19th century, it's thought that the British GDP benefited about 11% of that GDP because of slavery. So effectively, about 11% of the gross British domestic product in the beginning of the 19th century was generated by people who, over 200 years, had provided unpaid slave labour. The second factor is that, as David Lammy pointed out, in 1833, a huge loan was taken out. The British government took out a huge loan and it repaid the slave owners, but it didn't compensate the slaves. And people may be shocked to discover that that was still being paid off as late as 2015. So we have a background in which the British economy, as other advanced economies, certainly gained huge advantage by unpaid labour, in our case particularly in the Caribbean, and that the British government after government was paying basically reparations but to slave owners as late as 2015. And of course nobody ever complained about that. So that's what this is the background to this. People saying, well, shouldn't there be some kind of recompense now for those communities that were damaged by slavery? That's what the debate's all about.
But Martin, weren't some of those slave owners black? and some of them were from the Caribbean. So when you realise that not all of them were from the UK, how do you then determine who to give what if you are even going to do that? Because some of those compensated would have been black owners.
Certainly in West Africa, for example, as you rightly alluded to, the situation was extremely complicated because there we have people like the Spanish, the Portuguese, the British and others actually negotiating with some West African tribes who, of course, had enslaved people from further inland in Africa. Certainly in West Africa, it's highly complicated. In the Caribbean, I think it's less complicated because, without a shadow of a doubt, most of the economy there was driven by unfree labour. Now, there would have been some people who benefited from it who were mixed race, but certainly the majority of people that provided the unfree labour were black. And what happened afterwards was it was replaced by a system of indentured labour, by which even when they were freed in 1833, they were having to provide a great deal of input into the West Indian and Caribbean economy. Basically, they weren't being paid the market rate by any means whatsoever. While at the same time, of course, compensation was going to the slave owners, not to the slaves. And that's the argument that basically these communities have started so far behind because of treatment, particularly in the Caribbean, that something needs to be done now in order to bring them up to a level that's at least approaching some kind of equity, really.
Yeah, but wouldn't some of the slaves have built infrastructure and things like that? There would be some sort of benefit to the people in those countries. And also, lots of people who are Caribbean and other descendants live in this country. So ultimately, the money that will be used to compensate them would be, the British taxpayer would be paying for this, surely. So if, for example, I was one of the people who was enslaved or one of my descendants, I'm now paying money through my taxes to then pay for people who in another country for slavery. It's too complicated.
You're certainly right in saying it's massively complicated.
It's too complicated, it doesn't work.
Yeah, well, indeed, it might not work. What I think is necessary, though, is I think that former slave-owning countries, like ourselves, like France, like Spain, like other countries, do need to think about where their foreign aid budget is going, to what extent it's making up for the kind of damage that was done by slavery. But I think when calculating that kind of figure, it also has to be taken into account what has been given in foreign aid since 1945, because clearly that's part of the global picture. So I think we in the wealthy North, we often say the West, do have a responsibility to assist people in the global South, or in this case in Caribbean, because they have suffered from the kind of behaviour that's happened in the past. But we do also have to take into account things that have been done in the last generation or so to try to recompense. So I don't think it's simple as saying we're starting from zero now. I think there needs to be some kind of contribution, so there needs to be some kind of engagement, but we do have to recognise at the very least the extreme complexity of it, as you've pointed out.
And how far back do we go? Because they can start there, but we could go further back when other people were enslaved and so on and so forth. But do you know what I mean? It doesn't. Yeah. None of it makes any sense. In your view, how far back should we go?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, obviously, there comes a point at which you have to say, well, how far into history can you sort of right the wrongs?
Exactly.
The only reason why I would say something about the transatlantic slavery and the current day is particular and peculiar is because in many ways the Industrial Revolution was driven by this kind of slavery, was assisted by the kind of slavery, and we live in that kind of world. So I would say the kind of world that we live in 2024 is one that's been directly related to the world that emerged after, let's say, 1750, 1760. And I think we are peculiarly connected. I think once you go back beyond that, it gets very, very difficult. But I think we are part of that modern world, if you like, that post-industrial world, which certainly did benefit. I mean, certainly in this country, although my ancestors were working class, so obviously not a lot of the money flowed to them. But certainly people in institutions and in landowners in this country and elsewhere did benefit greatly. And I think it's that kind of conversation that needs to go on. But it doesn't have simplistic answers, as you rightly pointed out.
And also the Industrial Revolution saved many, many lives, including many in those countries as well. Listen, Martin Whittock, really good to talk to you. Thank you very much for your insight into that topic. That's also in a historian, Martin Whittock. Right, before we get stuck into the debate, let me show you what's coming up in the show today. For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, are the freebies beginning to pay off? The football freebie fight has kicked off once again after it was revealed that a senior Labour donor advisor landed a top lobbying job with the Premier Premier League. It follows reports the Attorney General was drafted in to sign off Taylor Swift taxpayers-funded police escorts, and so on and so forth. The list goes on. Then across the pond in World View, the US presidential race is heating up as Kamala Harris puts pressure on Donald Trump to share his medical records. I'll bring you the latest with Paul Dudridge. And, of course, the legendary Jeff Banks will be here live after 5. That is coming up in the next hour. As ever, send me your thoughts. Post your comments. gbnews.com/your say. But let's get back to Ed Miliband's plans to erect thousands of pylons across the country, which have been criticised as being way too expensive. An official report found that burying the cables underground, could be cheaper, despite the government claiming that on the contrary. And all of this as Transport Secretary Louise Haigh rocked the boat further. Get that? Attacking P&O ferries and risking £1 billion of investment by its parent company DP World. So as Keir Starmer lost control of his party. Joining me, senior GB News political commentator Nigel Nelson. Hello, Nigel. Nice to see you. Right. Let's talk about this because, you know, Ed Miliband, he's gone pylon mad, hasn't he? Really? He's gone crazy with those things.
Well, I mean, first of all, we've got to decide whether this report is actually true. It does seem a bit counterintuitive that tunnelling underground is actually cheaper than sticking up a pylon. If it is, then that's exactly what Ed Miliband should do, of course. But there are other questions that come into it, and one of them is that, according to this report, you wouldn't be able to complete this till 2034. The target for clean energy is 2030, and if you go beyond that date, you're going to have to pay the wind farm operators for not being able to use the grid, and that would cost you an extra $4 billion. So at the moment, I don't quite think the sums add up.
But that's a stupid plan, isn't it? That you've set it at a deadline where if you don't reach it now, you're then going to have to compensate wind farms. You get compensated anyway, by the way, for overproducing energy which we don't use, which just then goes into the ether. I mean, it's all wrong, isn't it? I mean, it just doesn't work. None of it is working. We're losing a lot of the power and energy produced by these wind farms at a rate even now.
Yeah, we are. I mean, that's the whole point of sticking the pylons up. Because that will carry the power from the wind farms to the grid. And at the moment, you're absolutely right. We are compensating the wind farms because they can't use the grid when it gets overloaded. So if you go beyond 2030, we've got another 4 years of doing that. When it comes down to the deadline, it's not really an arbitrary deadline. The whole point, and obviously this depends on whether you're a backer of net zero by 2050 or not, the whole point is to reach that kind of target by 2050. And if we keep putting these measures back, we won't do that.
All right, let's quickly move on to Louise Haigh then and her comments about P&O ferries, which was utter madness, seeing as they have a meeting on Monday with the backers who could be putting forward a £1 billion worth of investment. I mean, was that a bit ridiculous of her to do that, a bit foolish, some might say?
Well, I mean, I think she was right in what she said. I mean, the way that P&O treated its staff back in 2022 was absolutely abysmal. But what we have here is the problem about being in government. I mean, pragmatism is sort of crashing into principle. That while Lou Haigh may well have been right in what she said, the timing was wrong. Now, there is some suggestion she wasn't aware that this £1 billion investment into the London Gateway port in Thurrock was actually on the cards. I do find that a bit hard to believe, but she is the Transport Secretary. So if she didn't know, there is a failure of communication somewhere along the line which needs to be addressed. If she did know, it was the wrong time to say it. You're talking about an investment summit tomorrow. The people coming are worth 40 trillion pounds, and a plan is to stick £40 billion worth of investment in Britain. That's really important.
Very briefly, I've got about 10 seconds, Nigel. Should she perhaps resign, seeing as she's coming across as quite incompetent?
No, I don't think she's incompetent. I think it was an unfortunate remark, and I think we can forgive this one.
Well, it depends how much it costs us, Nigel. Nigel Nelson, thank you very much. That's Nigel Nelson. He's the GB News' senior political commentator. Right, you're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Louise Haigh, as we talked about it, rocked the boat, attacking P&O cruises ahead of Prime Minister's Global Business Summit. Should she be forced to resign? Let me know your thoughts. Stay tuned. This is GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Well, the first thing on in my mind when I heard about this is, what has this country come to when we're talking about getting kids as young as 6 years old to be jabbed weekly or however often it is, because they are too fat? Where are the parents in all of this? There's three things actually here that are important. Number one is we do not know the long-term consequences of these jabs. So if I had a child and I was going to let them do, have the jab, I would be feeling like I'm treating them like a lab rat, to be quite honest with you, because we don't know the long-term consequences. Secondly, the manufacturers are clear that some of the potential side effects can be very serious. We're talking about potentially pancreatitis, let's get my word out, and also it lists as a potential side effect thyroid cancer. Arguably, it's called the gamble jab, to be honest with you, because of these potential side effects at the moment. And then thirdly, I come back to the parents. Where are the parents in all of this? Because they are the role models. So it really is about parenting, and it's about parenting from being a role model yourself in terms of being slim and healthy, and not expecting a jab to take your place and other people to take your place. If you have children, they are your responsibility. Think before you breed. The other thing you need to remember with this is, when you stop taking that jab, it is highly likely that you're going to put all the weight back on. Now, the thought of a child of 6 years of age, starting with that jab, conditioning them mentally to live with that jab, as far as I'm concerned, is absolutely not on.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Conservative MPs have finally chosen their top two for the leadership. And now, it's over to the members. Join me, Christopher Hope, on Thursday as Kevin Badenoch and Robert Jenrick are quizzed by Conservative Party members and myself at our GB News leadership event.
And afterwards, join me, Patrick Christys, with a live studio audience and a star panel as we discuss what it means for the Conservative Party and what it means for you. Decision Time, the race to lead, from 7 p.m. this Thursday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Right, 25 minutes after 4 o'clock. Welcome. If you just tuned in, welcome on board. This is GB News, we're Britain's news channel. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Welcome again to my panel, broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, and also political commentator Jonathan Liss. All right, let's talk about Louise Haigh, Transport Secretary. Should she resign? Jonathan Liss.
Absolutely not. Why should she?
Well, because she may have cost, be costing billions in terms of investment because of her loose lips, and we can't have a secretary like that.
All right, well, to take on that substantive point, the government has said that actually it's not the view of the government what she said, and the chief of the DP World is actually attending.
Well, he is now,
summit.
but he wasn't going to.
OK, fine, but you said it's cost billions, and that's...
Well, no, we don't know that. Her comments could have cost billions, and she's supposed to be the Transport Secretary. And one of the parts of her excuse was that she didn't know about the meeting.
I think that I'd be amazed if the announced expansion of the London Gateway Port did not go ahead. It seems completely ludicrous that they would sort of not make that investment because of the comments of Louise Haigh. But I think there's a serious point here that nothing she said was wrong. She said she made a point which she's made many times in the last 2 years, which is that P&O behaved absolutely disgracefully, and it should not be legal what they did. And that is why the government has introduced legislation to make sure that it cannot happen again. So when she describes them as a rogue operator, she's completely within her rights to do that. And obviously she put out a statement in that press release calling them a rogue operator. I don't think she said in the press release that they should people were encouraged.
But she said it out loud.
But she said it in an interview.
Didn't she? That's even worse.
Look, I think that She is entitled to her view. I think that...
Sorry, Jonathan. She is, but she's the Transport Secretary, so she can't really be talking like that. And then if she's saying that, why are the government then prepared to take another investment from this very same company that she is castigating? This is the problem, isn't it?
We have a really difficult situation with capitalism that sometimes we need investment in this country. That's absolutely undoubted. But also, we need to look after people who work for those companies. And sometimes there's a conflict between those two demands. And so we'd hope that with a left-wing government that actually of course, we're welcoming investment, but we're also saying that people have to be treated well.
Yeah.
I don't agree with people going into bat for sort of multi-billion-pound corporations at the expense of workers. But at the same time, clearly we do need investment, and there has to be some kind of balance between those two things.
Well, look, apparently, as you said, they're changing the legislation, so that won't happen again. So she should close her mouth about that. Danny Kelly.
I think you need to use more intelligent language. I think, first of all, I don't think P&O would have pulled out. This is just my view. P&O are hard-nosed business people, and if it's good for them to do a deal with this country, they're going to continue to do the deal, no matter what the Transport Secretary has said. But, however, you need to use intelligent language. And my concern, Nana, would be, can you have confidence in the woman? You asked, should she resign?
Yeah.
I think if she had lost this deal, although I just think that it would never be lost anyway, but if she had lost it, then definitely because of the language. But I don't want to appear contradictory, because I don't think P&O would have pulled out anyway. But I think you need to have confidence in your secretaries and your ministers that when you open your gob, you're not going to insult vast swathes of the capitalist market, bearing in mind that there's such a left-wing government as well.
I'm going to read this from Brendan. He sent me a message, so I have no reason to doubt that he's not genuine. He says, I am one of the 800 staff workers who got made redundant 2 years ago, and I'm disgusted that Louise Haigh is being condemned for saying P&O are rogue traders. I don't think that's quite why she's being condemned. When 2 years ago, they said in front of us, they all said that they will never get away with it, which they have done, and the government has now gone on to try to make investments with the traders. Keir Starmer doesn't care about the workers, more about money and investment, and DP World would get investments they want and will go on to employ foreign labour going forward. We don't stand a chance to get those jobs. Brendan, thank you for that. That's Brendan saying that. Listen, Brendan, I think the fact is that no one's really saying that is wrong to have that opinion of how they treated the staff. It's more, if they're going to get investment from this company, it's a bit silly.
Rogue is a very strong word.
Exactly.
I take you back to my earlier point. Could have used different words. She could have said, we don't agree with this policy. We don't agree that 800 people can be fired and then rehired on different T's and C's. You can express your disgust in a very intelligent manner rather than being so blunt. It's like hitting someone over the head with a hammer.
So
rogue.
Danny, I take your point, and I do think the ministers need to be careful with their language, and we all need to be precise with our language. Yeah. And obviously, ministers have a special responsibility to be a little bit diplomatic. But at the same time, I think that we are so fed up with wishy-washy, mealy-mouthed, sort of completely milquetoast political statements all the time, where people will never say what they think, and actually someone saying, you know what, this is a rogue cowboy operator, I wouldn't use their services anymore. I think a lot of people would cheer that.
Well, if it costs trillions or billions of dollars or whatever it is that it may cost us if they do pull out, because they did initially say that they won't be going to the meeting after her comments, if it does cost billions, then I don't think she'd be fit to run that office. But what do you think? GBNews.com/your say. Should Transport Secretary Louise Haigh resign after her comments? GBNews.com/your say. Next, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, are Labour's freebies beginning to pay off? First, let's get your latest news headlines with Katie Bowen.
Nana, thank you. It's just gone 4:30. These are your latest headlines from the GB newsroom. The King says he's greatly saddened by the sudden death of Alex Salmond, the former First Minister of Scotland. The Alba Party leader died yesterday afternoon, aged 69, from a suspected heart attack during a trip to North Macedonia. Mr Salmond had made a speech at the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy Forum and is understood to have collapsed at a lunch in a crowded room. There will be a post-mortem examination to confirm the cause of death. Robert Jenrick says he'll make Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg chairman of the Conservative Party if he triumphs against Kemi Badenoch in the party leadership contest. Mr Jenrick told GB News this morning that Jacob has been a tireless campaigner for the grassroots and he understands better than anyone else the need for party reform.
want to have a different way to select candidates. So we end the favoured sons and daughters of the leader being parachuted in. That was a disgrace.
Yes.
I want to stop members just getting emails asking for money, but never asking what do they want and where do they want the party to go. Let's build a mass membership, democratic organisation. I think Jacob will be a great asset to that.
Jonathan Reynolds says it's not the government's position that P&O Ferries is a rogue operator, despite a press release this week calling them a rogue employer. P&O Ferries' owner, DP World, will attend the International Investment Summit tomorrow. They'd previously threatened to pull out of the event and a £1 billion port investment. That's after the Transport Secretary, Louise Haigh, criticised their employment strategy and called for a boycott. The operator was criticised by politicians from both main parties in March 2022 when it suddenly sacked 800 British seafarers and replaced them with cheaper, mainly overseas staff, saying it was necessary to stave off bankruptcy. The business secretary told GB News' Camilla Tominey that the £1 billion investment will go ahead.
Quickly on this issue, that's not the government's position. The issue, obviously, with P&O Ferries is we're not going to recoil from that. We thought it was wrong, the fire and rehire that we saw, those workers being sacked and then taken back on fewer terms and conditions. But we have changed the law. It was lawful under the Conservative government. It will be unlawful under this Labour government. So where companies accept that, acknowledge that, can work within that framework, we'll, of course, talk to them about investments. And I can tell you they're coming to the summit and the investment will go ahead.
And finally, for now, nearly 500 migrants crossed the English Channel in one day. New figures released by the Home Office today show 471 migrants crossed the Channel on 9 small boats yesterday. The latest arrivals bring the total so far this year to just over 27,200. A Home Office spokesman insists they're committed to dismantling people smuggling operations, saying the government will stop at nothing to bring these criminals to justice. Those are your latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Katie Bowen. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon and welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Still chilly through this afternoon, particularly down the east coast, but we will start to see some rain and some cloud arriving from the west, and it will begin to turn a little bit milder. But at first, still got that high pressure, so fairly calm conditions across particularly the eastern half of the UK. But as we head through this evening, developing a southerly wind, and we've got these frontal systems arriving from the west. So that rain arriving from the west, thickening cloud across the far north, and we'll start to see some particularly heavy outbursts of rain across parts of Devon and Cornwall and parts of Wales through this evening as well. The winds picking up here particularly as well, turning quite blustery overnight as that rain moves slowly eastwards. Milder under the southerly airflow, temperatures into the double figures, but still cool across the far north into the single figures again here, and still a chilly start to the day on Monday. But as we head further south, we do still have this rain lingering on through Monday morning. So quite a grey and damp start to the day. Quite difficult driving conditions for the rush hour. A little bit drier the further west that you go, and some bright sunshine to start the day across Northern Ireland. Similarly, there'll be some brighter sunny spells across parts of Scotland, but across the far northwest, still holding on to this area of rain as well. Through the rest of the day, that rain will slowly start to move away, and we will start to see something a little bit drier across the southern half of the UK, but it will hold onto the cloud through much of Monday. You'll still be holding onto that quite grey and perhaps drizzly conditions on perhaps some coast and over some high ground. But for Northern Ireland, the far north of England and Scotland, there will be some decent sunny spells around. Temperatures here will be a touch higher than we saw on Sunday, and across the south milder, although still fairly cloudy, so those temperatures perhaps not feeling quite as warm. Heading through this evening, it's still holding on to a fairly cloudy picture across the southern half of the UK. Further north still, they're going to have these clearer spells developing as well. Through Tuesday, most places will be staying dry, but we start to see some wet weather moving in through Wednesday. That's all from me. Catch you later.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark meets at My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here We do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
38 minutes after 4 o'clock. Welcome. This is GB News. We are Britain's news channel. Don't forget as well, you can download the GB News app. It is completely free and watch all the programmes in your own time. But I'm Nana Akua and loads more still to come. It's now time for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, are the freebies beginning to pay off? And by that I mean the football freebie fight has kicked off once again after a senior Labour advisor landed a top lobbying job with the Premier League. And it follows reports the Attorney General was drafted in to sign off Taylor Swift's taxpayer-funded police escort for her London concerts this summer. So, as these ministers and people are receiving these freebies and these odd things going on, suddenly policies appear to be working in tandem with them. For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, are they actually beginning to pay off? Well, joining me now, my panel, broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly and political commentator Jonathan Liss. Danny Kelly, I'll start with you. Taylor Swift tickets and things like that.
Well, my understanding, so she received outriders. No doubt it was an armed police escort, something normally reserved for visiting politicians and world dignitaries. My understanding is that she had to cancel 3 of her concerts in Austria because of some sort of ISIS-inspired plot, OK? So the Austrian old bill said, look, this is going to happen. She cancelled them.
Yeah.
And then she said, OK, even though there was nothing in the UK, no intelligence to say that she was under threat in the UK, apparently her and her mum said, look, unless we get the old bill, armed plot to take us into Wembley, we're going to cancel them. Now, then it becomes something really interesting because Mayor Khan, because I think Sadiq Khan...
He got tickets as well,
but I think ultimately he's in charge of policing in London. So the Metropolitan Police are independent politically, and this broke protocol, so someone may have leaned on the Met, and that's where it becomes interesting. So is there a conflict of interest? Because if there wasn't a threat, you have a multi-millionaire pop star who is saying, unless I get armed police, I'm not going to play. Well, and then someone made a decision based on that ultimatum.
But if she hadn't done that, she would then need to be compensating her fans. So that is not a realistic proposition for her, and it would cost her a fortune. And frankly, a lot of the people who received these free tickets were at that concert. So Ed Balls, Yvette Cooper, I think Lisa Nandy was also there. There were quite a few others. Sadiq Khan, I think, was there too. Jonathan Liss.
I think that if you take a step back and think about the context in which this was happening, if you're Taylor Swift, and obviously it's very difficult to get into the mind of Taylor Swift, but if you are the most famous woman in the world,
billionaire Taylor Swift,
the most successful musician of the moment, and for a generation at least, and someone so powerful that she literally changes GDP figures when she plays concerts.
Right.
Countries are actually desperate for her to come because they literally boost the GDP figures. So when you have someone with that level of power, which is easily on the par of kind of a minor head of state, you would say, easily.
Yeah.
And you've just, as you point out, has just had her concerts cancelled in Austria because of a credible terrorist threat. If you are the Labour government and you are weighing up the different options, it is of paramount importance that, first of all, this woman is kept safe. Right. And second of all, that the concerts go ahead. And if something, God forbid...
Thirdly, sorry, you missed the thirdly. And thirdly, that you don't accept tickets from this woman who's going to do this concert, so it looks like she's manipulated you.
I think Yvette Cooper went as a guest of Ed Balls, actually. She wasn't given a ticket in her own right.
Ed Balls was?
Ed Balls, as Yvette Cooper's husband, was offered a free ticket.
Okay.
And she was his plus one. I really... Look...
They're married.
Yes,
she's the Home Secretary.
Yes, the Home Secretary is allowed to be married.
She is somebody who is organising these sort of police cavalcade. Come on, don't be so naive.
No, I'm not being naive. I think you're being being cynical.
Well, absolutely. If you look
at the grift, if you look at the history of grifting politicians, I don't think there are many people who have put Yvette Cooper near the top of the list.
Who cares? I don't care where they put her on the list. The point is that Taylor Swift got a blue light escort to her concert after her mum and her complained and said they wouldn't do it. And who would they have spoken to and who organised it? And those who organised it, it seems a lot of them suddenly appear to also go to that concert. That's my issue with it.
Do you think that because they got free tickets, they then gave the go-ahead for the armed police?
I think they were softened up. And this is the problem with freebies, that if you accept them, you are now no longer an objective observer, but now you are intricate, you're involved in the mechanism of the decision-making. And that's the problem. And no matter what they say, the fact that they accepted that makes them weak because of it.
What's interesting is Prince Harry can't get an armed police protection. Prince Harry, he's moaning about that. Whenever he comes to the UK, the Met won't give him an armed outrider, if you like.
Well,
I'm guessing that they were
do it
armed.
on a case-by-case basis, but he's not a working royal, and I think that they've opened the floodgates.
And Taylor Swift is a working royal.
She's not a working royal, no.
But what they've made a business decision. The Met, if the Met were leaned on, politicians have made a business decision to break protocol and give Taylor Swift an armed police outrider or whatever they call it.
Having received tickets for a concert.
OK, you see, I'm going to try and separate that.
Why?
Well, because you're probably right, but the Met have been leaned on and they've broken protocol because of political pressure, because they wanted the revenue from the Taylor Swift concert. That's what I'm saying. And at what level does that protocol be broken again in the future? Are we talking that if it's Taylor Swift? What about someone not so famous, who's not going to bring in the GDP that Jonathan...
I think that you have all these things done on a case-by-case basis. I think, you know, if you had just emerged from a period of rioting in this country, there was the country was really tense. You just had a credible terrorist threat. The government, if you had... Can you imagine... Nana, can you imagine if anything had happened at one of these concerts, or if Swift's safety had been compromised, what that would have meant for the government?
OK, first of all...
There was no credible threat.
There was no credible threat. It wouldn't have been... She's a billionaire. She can also afford her own security. But the bottom line is this. It's irrelevant. That's irrelevant. The fact that they've accepted tickets, they are now no longer credible. That's the problem.
I think that people can separate their personal and professional lives. People have always done that.
Well, then they should buy their own tickets. Buy your own tickets. Like, if you want to go to Taylor Swift's concert, nobody cares. Just buy your own tickets. Because if Taylor Swift suddenly gets a blue light to come through to her concerts, then you can no longer say that you're completely detached from it, in particular if you're the Home Secretary and you're also going to the concert.
If there's a credible threat like the Austrian threat, I would agree with Jonathan. No credible threat.
We have no idea what the intelligence was behind
if there was a credible threat, we would have known about it by now. There's so much political hoo-ha about it.
The MI5 is dealing with threats all the time.
But that wasn't one of them.
Yeah.
You don't know that.
We don't know.
Well, let's see what the viewers think, because this show's nothing without them and their views. Let's welcome our great British voices, their opportunity to be on the show and tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing. Let's go to Watford. Let's have a chat with David Balme. David Balme, do you feel like these politicians are sort of in the pockets of all these other people, seeing as tickets and freebies and all sorts of things are going down, and then odd decisions are being made?
I happen to think that it's the most corrupt and inept government we've ever had, and in 100 days they have completely shown that the Tories were completely honest and open about everything. It's incredible. They have opened the floodgates. Danny's right. What about Prince Harry? He can now go back to court and claim that actually, if you can give this to a pop star, I'm a member of the royal family, I demand this, and the courts go around and say yes. They have by whoever's leaned on the commissioner, and I don't care what a certain mayor says, he has the ultimate power to say yes or no, has been shown. He has proven time and time again he controls what goes on. If he has that power, then Prince Harry and any minor celebrity who reckons he's going to be bringing in money to the country, let's say Elon Musk wanted to come over here, would he not then have a right to demand a police escort wherever he went?
Well, that's the thing, David. What you've highlighted is there. Where do you draw the line? David Balme, thank you very much for your thoughts. Really good to talk to you. He's our great British voice. He's there in Watford. Exactly, where do you draw the line? What's the criteria? You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, World View. The US presidential race is heating up as Kamala Harris puts pressure on Donald Trump to share his medical records. We'll bring you the latest with Paul Duddridge. He's live in LA.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Quite a few actors on this programme on a Friday night, and I always ask them the same question. Was you a nuisance at school?
I was quite naughty, yeah. I got the slipper in front of the whole school at the age of 6.
Really?
It was quite humiliating. And I got the cane as well a bit later on, yeah.
But it didn't do me any harm, did it, really?
No, do you know what? I think, you know, the schools these days, things have changed a lot, haven't they? And you've got your kids assaulting teachers and stuff.
Well, we're not advocating really violence at all.
Not at all. And well, but I think, you know, my mother used to be quite strict with me as a boy, but I probably needed it. You know, I did things like, I watched a Western once and I saw these the Indians firing blazing arrows into the cowboy's truck or whatever, in the cabin. So I thought, I'll have a go at that. And I had a bow and arrow with some petrol in the garage. I found a rag and fired this flaming arrow into the next door neighbour's fence.
So you're an arsonist as well?
Yeah. Box of matches, absolutely. What excitement. And my mother ran out of the kitchen with a bowl of washing up water and threw it over the fence. What on earth are you doing?
Do not try this at home, by the way.
No.
So, what got you into acting, John?
Well, I went to the cinema every week because we didn't have a TV. Yeah. So I really got into watching these movies. And I used to come out and then I'd go to Saturday morning pictures as well. And I'd come out of the movie and I'd feel like Paul Newman for about an hour. Yeah. Or I'd pretend to be with my friends when we were younger. Yeah. We'd go playing games along the beach in North Kent. And Bay. And so that's how I got the taste of it, I guess. Then I joined an amateur dramatic society, local theatre group. I did Oliver, and I played Noah Claypole, who locks Oliver in the coffin. In Oliver.
Did you have a dog?
Yes, an untrained pit bull. And I got up onto the stage. I tied him to the table in the tavern. Did across the stage with the table. And on another occasion, he lifted his leg against the table as well. So
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. This is GB News live on TV, online and on digital radio. It's fast approaching 51 minutes after 4 o'clock. Now, US presidential candidate Kamala Harris has released a medical report saying that she is in excellent health and fit for the presidency. She's now asking rival Donald Trump to do the same. So let's go live now to the United States and speak to the host of the Politics People podcast, Paul Dudderidge. Paul. Well. Polls are neck and neck, apparently. Is this?
Polls are neck and neck. It is a very, very tight race. I know everybody says this every 4 years, but it is a very, very tight race, and it could go either way. The betting odds, I have to say, have massively surged in Trump's favour. Kamala hasn't done herself any favours with her media appearances, which the Democrat Party are telling her to make because she's kind of doing a Biden 2020. But she is definitely harming her chances every time she talks to the media. No matter how friendly they are, it seems to have a negative effect. But as you say, the medical records, she's released them. And this is the only avenue that seems to be for her to compete in. She's saying Donald Trump won't release his medical records and he's not being transparent. It's typical of him not being transparent. But this is a woman who for the last 3.5 years has been in an administration which has, you can form your own opinions, but it certainly seems to have kept the health of the president from the public. So she's accusing Donald Trump of not being transparent when she's actually described Biden as being extraordinarily smart and can see around corners, even though his wife now has to host cabinet meetings.
Yeah. You see, that's the thing, isn't it? She's concerned now about Trump's health, but yet she wasn't bothered about Joe Biden's, which kind of seems a bit odd, really. And they all tried to pull the wool over our eyes, even though it seemed pretty obvious that he wasn't fit to do that. Now, now, what else is going on there? Because Trump, what's he doing with regard to his the stuff going on in California?
Well, he played Coachella last night. He's like Miley Cyrus. He came to Coachella in California. No chance of winning California. 22 days to go until the election. Joe Biden's still president, apparently. And he's doing an appearance at Coachella. The only way you can drill down into this is that he is trying to secure the Latino vote, is really what the thinking of, the sophistry on this is, that's the reason for appearing. But appearing in a state that isn't one of the battleground states for him, that he's got no hope of winning, and I'm an Escalator fan. It's an audacious move by him to sort of come into the enemy territory. It's definitely an act of confidence and cockiness practically on his part to come to a state he can't win, to draw a crowd. He says there was 100,000. Other people are saying there's 15,000, but that doesn't really matter. He was playing a big gig at Coachella last night and had an extraordinarily positive reception. But for him to come to California at all with 22 days to go in the election is kind of a bold move.
And it's a bit clutching at straws to try and just attack him on health issues and stuff like that. What policies, I mean, we've got about 30 seconds. What things are people sort of commenting with regard to Kamala and Trump? What are their main weaknesses?
Kamala's main weakness is she keeps repeating, and I don't know who's advising her, but she keeps saying, she said twice now that she wouldn't change any of the policies. She stands by every policy, and she stands by everything that Biden has done in the last 4 years. Now, when you start adding in...
What about Trump?
Crime
Running
rates
out of time. Trump's weakness. You've got 10 seconds.
Trump's weakness is that he's currently not in the Oval Office. That's it. I think he's bomb-proof.
All right, Paul Dudgery, thank you so much. He's the host of the Politics People podcast. More to come in the next hour. Jeff Banks will be live. But first, let's get some weather with Amy Makota.
A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon and welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Still chilly through this afternoon, particularly down the east coast, but we will start to see some rain and some cloud arriving from the west, and it will begin to turn a little bit milder. But at first, still got a high pressure, so fairly calm conditions across particularly the eastern half of the UK. But as we head through this evening, developing a southerly wind, and we've got these frontal systems arriving from the west. So that rain arriving from the west, thickening cloud across the far north, and we'll start to see some particularly heavy outbursts of rain across parts of Devon and Cornwall and parts of Wales through this evening as well. The wind's picking up here particularly as well, turning quite blustery overnight as that rain moves slowly eastwards. Milder under the southerly airflow, temperatures into the double figures, but still cool across the far north into the single figures again here, and still a chilly start to the day on Monday. But as we head further south, we do still have this rain lingering on through Monday morning, so quite a grey and damp start to the day. Quite difficult driving conditions for the rush hour, a little bit drier the further west that you go, and some bright sunshine to start the day across Northern Ireland. Similarly, there'll be some brighter sunny spells across parts of Scotland, but across the far northwest, still holding on to this area of rain as well. Through the rest of the day, that rain will slowly start to move away, and we will start to see something a little bit drier across the southern half of the UK, but it will hold on to the cloud through much of Monday. You'll still be holding on to that quite grey and perhaps drizzly conditions on perhaps some coast and over some high ground. But for Northern Ireland, the far north of England and Scotland, there will be some decent sunny spells around. Temperatures here will be a touch higher than we saw on Sunday, and across the south milder, although still fairly cloudy, so those temperatures perhaps not feeling quite as warm. Heading through this evening, it's still holding on to a fairly cloudy picture across the southern half of the UK. Further north, still they're going to have these clearer spells developing as well. Through Tuesday, most places will be staying dry, but we start to see some wet weather moving in through Wednesday. That's all from me. Catch you later.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed boiler repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We love Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and he did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark meets at My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. It's just coming up to 5 o'clock, and for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me for the next hour, broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, and also political commentator Jonathan Liss. What are you looking at? Over this way. Coming up, Energy Secretary Ed Miliband has gone pylon mad, even though there is a suggestion that if he waited a few years, cables underground would potentially be cheaper, saving the British taxpayer money. He still wants to press ahead with his pylons at 2030. So would you be happy with a pylon in your backyard? My poll on X is up right now asking you that question. Then the interview. I'm joined by fashion designer extraordinaire Jeff Banks. He will be here live telling me all about his 6-decade-long career dressing the stars. He's amazing. He's in his 80s. He looks amazing. You won't want to miss that. But before we get started, let's get your latest news with Katie Byrne.
Nana, thank you, and good afternoon. It's just gone 5 o'clock. These are your latest headlines from the GB newsroom. The King says he's greatly saddened by the sudden death of Alex Salmond, the former First Minister of Scotland. The Alba Party leader died yesterday afternoon, aged 69, from a suspected heart attack during a trip to North Macedonia. Mr Salmond had made a speech at the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy Forum and is understood to have collapsed at lunch in a crowded room. People in Scotland have been reacting to his death.
His passing is a great shock, and I think for most Scots, whatever their opinions, it's sad. He was a pillar of the independence movement.
I think he'll be remembered as the man that nearly got Scotland independence.
Well, he nearly got us independence, but, you know, nearly's not good enough.
I couldn't believe it, to be honest. You're shocked. I don't even know how he died yet. I'm not sure. I met him years ago when he was he was walking around Swinton Crescent in Baillieston, and he was handing out leaflets and that, and he played mate pool.
He's a good man, very good man. Yeah, very good man. Done his best for Scotland, you know.
Alex Salmond, who died yesterday. Robert Jenrick says he'll make Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg chairman of the Conservative Party if he triumphs against Kemi Badenoch in the party leadership contest.
As chairman, Sir Jacob, who lost his seat at the general election, will be put in charge of the party's campaigning operations. Mr Jenrick told GB News this morning that Jacob has been a tireless campaigner for the grassroots and he understands better than anyone the need for party reform.
I want to have a different way to select candidates, so we end the favoured sons and daughters of the leader being parachuted in. That was a disgrace.
Yes.
I want to stop members just getting emails asking for money but never asking what do they want and where do they want the party to go. Let's build a mass membership, democratic organisation. I think Jacob will be a great asset to that.
Latest news from the Middle East now. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has spoken in the last few moments and expressed his regret of any harm done to UN personnel in Lebanon after 15 peacekeepers were injured in what they call a shocking violation when Israeli tanks forcibly entered their base. The UK is among 40 nations strongly condemning attacks on those UN peacekeepers. It's also been reported this afternoon that the US plans to send an anti-missile system to Israel. Lebanon's health ministry says at least 15 people have been killed in the last day by Israeli airstrikes on 3 different villages. Israeli military say around 115 rockets have been fired from Lebanon into Israel today. Hezbollah rocket barrages triggered sirens across northern Israel overnight and into today. And just briefly, the aerospace commander of Iran's Revolutionary Guard has said a short time ago that Tehran is ready to respond to any misstep by Israel. Jonathan Reynolds say it's not the government's position that P&O Ferries is a rogue operator, despite a press release this week calling them a rogue employer. P&O Ferries' owner, DP World, will attend the International Investment Summit tomorrow. They'd previously threatened to pull out of the event and a £1 billion port investment. That's after Transport Secretary Louise Haigh criticised their employment strategy and called for a boycott. The operator was criticised by politicians from both main parties in March 2022 when it suddenly sacked 800 British seafarers and replaced them with cheaper, mainly overseas staff, saying it was necessary to stave off bankruptcy. The business secretary told GB News' Camilla Tominey that the £1 billion investment will go ahead.
Quickly on this issue, that's not the government's position. The issue, obviously, with P&O Ferries is we're not going to recoil from that. We thought it was wrong, the fire and rehire that we saw, those workers being sacked and then taken back on fewer terms and conditions. But we have changed the law. It was lawful under the Conservative government. It will be unlawful under this Labour government. So where companies accept that, acknowledge that, can work within that framework, we'll, of course, talk to them about investments. And I can tell you they're coming to the summit and the investment will go ahead.
And finally this afternoon, Elon Musk's SpaceX has caught the Starship rocket booster for the first time ever as it returns to Earth after launch. If you're watching on television, you can see these extraordinary pictures of the liftoff. This is the 5th test of the Starship rocket. SpaceX CEO Elon Musk has simply wrote good morning on X after the test flight made history. The Starship has also reportedly performed a successful water landing in the Indian Ocean. Those are your latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Katie Bowen. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon. It's fast approaching 7 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Digital radio. Now, loads coming up, lots to get through, so stay with me. Coming up, our pylons of waste of money. Energy Secretary Ed Miliband's plan to erect thousands of them across Britain has been criticised after an official report found that buying electricity cables and burying them underground can be cheaper. Then, for the interview, joining me, fashion designer extraordinaire Jeff Banks, telling me all about his 6-decade-long career dressing the stars. Very excited for that. Then, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is it time to park reparations? All of this comes as the King and Prime Minister face demands for the UK to pay £200 billion in them over Britain's role in the transatlantic slave trade. But should we cough up the cash? Send me your thoughts, post your comments to gbnews.com/you'll say. Well, Ed Miliband, what do you think? Has he gone pylon crazy? The Energy Secretary plans to put thousands of them up across the country instead of what would appear cheaper underground electricity cables only a couple of years later. A new official report has found that burying these cables is cheaper over the longer term, but the government has previously claimed burying them is more expensive than erecting these pylons. So, are pylons a waste of money? Well, joining me now, meteorologist Jim Dale and also climate commentator Paul Burgess. Right. Oh, crikey. Where have they gone? This is a bit weird.
We're here.
Right. Well, I can't see you on the screen, but I can hear you. So I'm going to start with you, Jim Dale. I'm going to start with Paul Burgess, actually, because I want to get some information on the pylons themselves. Because is it true, cables underground, would that be better, cheaper? And are pylons really a waste of money?
It's not cheaper. Even the T-pylons are less expensive. In that report, by the way, the engineering report says what it is the National Grid says it's 10 to 20 times more expensive to bury them. And the report says, no, it's about 5 times more. But there's a story behind this that needs explaining to the public. The National Grid is a PLC. It is not owned. It's a monopoly. That's a PLC. And it's got people like Merrill Lynch, people like, BlackRock as investors. Now, when they get pylons, they have a monopoly on pylons. So it's obviously greatly in their interest to push pylons. And we shouldn't be having a situation where we've got the National Grid owned by foreign companies mainly, not controlled by any monopoly control, but is a monopoly and can just print a check. Oh, yeah, we'll have 30 or 40 or 60 billion pounds worth of upgrades, please. That's wrong. So, but the reason for all this is because of our supposedly cheap renewables, by the way, and the whole plan. So, but even that money, they're talking about 60 billion, the grid, over the next 5 years. And then they're talking about 500 billion for the distribution network after that. We are into huge sums of money, which won't be possible. And the choice will be either Miliband goes or the government goes.
All right. So are you saying then that cables underground are cheaper or not cheaper? They're not cheaper. They're more expensive, but they're less expensive as we thought they were.
That's right. They're much less expensive than is being claimed. And if you put a planning application in, like the National Grid has, saying they're 10 to 20 times more expensive, which is not true, then the planning process cannot consider the right figures to judge. And what we're doing, I live in Wales, and what we're doing is ruining our the beauty of the country is being ruined by this madness. And it's all because of supposedly cheap renewables, which is why we've gone up 10% this month in power, of course.
Jim Dale, your thoughts?
Yeah, good afternoon. Welcome to the International Day for Disaster Risk Reduction. You probably didn't know that, but that's what this is all about, reducing the risk of climate change. I'm a meteorologist. That's what I do day in, day out. Look, doesn't matter whether it's pylons or digging up the earth. In both respects, it is a blot on the landscape. You've got to admit. I'm not necessarily saying I wouldn't want a pylon in my back garden, but at the same time, I'm not sure I would want 10 foot of water in my back garden either, or a wildfire in my back garden. So you've got to go back to basics and decide and learn and educate yourselves in terms of what this is all about. This is taking cheaper renewables, wind, solar, sea in particular, this what we've got out in the North Sea, etc. From there to inland and distributing it across. So look, yeah, they're not the prettiest things in the world. And your question about polling, by the way, in terms of whether would you want one of these? Of course, 100% of people don't want this in their back garden. But maybe if there was an alternative that said, would you want 10 foot of water instead? There'd be 100%. Backing of that as well. This is the Daily Telegraph playing politics, doing what they usually do, the fossil fuel Telegraph, pushing the narrative against the government.
No, hold on. Sorry, the Daily Telegraph are not here to defend themselves, and that's just a piece that is written in there with regard to a report on it, yeah? So it's somebody else has written it with regard to this particular situation.
In the Daily Telegraph.
But Jim, you're talking about wildfires in your backyard and floods and stuff like that. I mean, come on.
Have you not seen them?
Come on.
Have you not seen what's happened of late? Have you not seen what's happened in Europe? This is happening right in front of our eyes. And it's climate deniers.
But Jim, a lot of those, as we know, a lot of those fires have been set up by us, and even those there know that. So come on, let's be honest about that.
all
yeah,
those
you've got to
studies,
have the dry
Paul Burgess.
geography, topography for that to actually take
Sorry, let's
hold.
get Paul's response. Paul Burgess.
Jim, all the studies, the IPCC scientists say no more hurricanes, no more tropical storms because of any influence by man, no more fires because of any influence by man. What you're going on is you're going on the headlines, you're going on the science.
Hey, Paul, have you been asleep for the
Let him finish. Let him finish, Jim. I'll come to you in a minute. Sorry, go on.
The IPCC say there's no evidence. They can't find any evidence in the rising sea levels due to mankind. Now, I'm sorry, but you're just doing scare tactics based on ignorance because you don't understand even what climate is, I'm afraid. Climate, if you're going to look at sea levels, you've got to look over the last 150, 200 years. If you're going to look at fires, look back to the 1930s.
We can do that. We can do that, Paul.
No, you don't understand basic science, Jim. I'm sorry, you don't.
Well, let him respond because you said he doesn't understand the basic science. Jim Dale.
Yeah, OK, so let's make this clear. Paul's obviously been asleep for the last fortnight as Hurricanes Elaine and Milton have gone through. Now, both of those from NASA and NOAA and other bodies have suggested that they are 30% more capacity for holding water and more powerful in terms of their intensity and how you get from a zero sort of situation to a 5, a hurricane force 5. The point about that is that is right on our doorstep, as were the European floods, as were what's going on.
Wouldn't it be better, though, very quickly, Jim, wouldn't it be better in that environment to have pylons or electricity cables underground rather than pylons that could be knocked over by the sorry, let me finish. Sorry, I'm just going to finish. Let me finish, Jim. Jim, be quiet. Jim, stop talking. Stop talking, Jim. I'm asking a question. Would it be better for the pylons to be, or the cables underground, if that's the calamitous effect that you think the climate change will have?
Yeah, if there's an option to put them underground, I'm sure there will be. It will be a little bit of both, if you like. I think that will happen. So costs will come into it. What the landscape is and what I don't think farmers necessarily want to go underground and dig their entire farm up at the same time as going to have a pylon. We've seen farms with pylons in them before they can work around them. So I think it's a bit of both. But I think we've got to look at the big picture. The big picture is why this is happening in the first place. It's very obvious. And those that are denying man-made climate change, you're in the last chance saloon.
All right. Well, you say that, but some people, very briefly, I'll give you 10 seconds, Paul Burgess, to come back on that, and then I'm going to have to wrap it.
The governor of Florida, when asked this question about climate change on the hurricanes, by the way, pointed out the far worst in Florida in the past, and the worst ones were in the 1930s. The Labor Day 1935 one, I think, was the worst by a mile. And if you look at all the graphs, the worst hurricanes, worst in the past. That's not denial, that's fact and history.
All right, OK, fair enough. Thank you very much, Paul Burgess, Jim Dale. Always good to talk to you both. Thank you. Right, just coming up to 16 minutes after 5 o'clock. Next, the interview. Joining me, fashion designer extraordinaire Jeff Banks. We'll find out about his 6-decade-long career dressing the stars. Don't go anywhere.
I'm Arlene Foster on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Tell us about this film, because it's obviously come from your own experiences.
We wanted to create something for the entertainment industry that wasn't just another kind of dull documentary. I mean, some of them are brilliant, they're very informative, but you kind of leave a bit bewildered and a little bit kind of flat. So we thought, I've got a passion for writing and you've obviously got an unbounded knowledge on the subject. Why don't we create a film with a kind of satirical look on eating disorders?
So this came it's been made 20 years after your own...
It is 20 years.
20 years,
practically to the day.
So Samantha, you suffered with OCD and an eating disorder as well?
Yes.
And that's when your mum became a counsellor, is that right?
A little bit later on, I think we spent a bit of time in the system and I realised that it wasn't working for us. So I took it on myself to learn as much as I could about the subject.
I call it a tragedy, probably the wrong word, but
No, it is a tragedy because mental ill health and eating disorders destroy the lives of not only the sufferers but their families as well.
But you've turned that into something so positive and so
It's
inspiring.
amazing, really, that 20 years ago our story was just beginning, and 20 years on, what we've done. But I have to say that very little has changed in the system.
I've heard that.
And I think that's what we're passionate about.
Yeah, so...
that was why we wanted to... I mean, I work with families every day and I see the destruction that eating disorders and other mental illnesses not just bring to the sufferer but the whole family.
Yeah.
And I think that's what really passions me, because obviously 20 years ago we were there. And I just feel that so much more needs to be done. And I think with eating disorders, there is still a lot of misunderstanding around the subject.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. If you just tuned in, where have you been? It's fine, you're here now. 19 minutes after 5 o'clock, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We are live on TV, online and digital radio. Now it's time for this week's interview. My guest, Jeff Banks. Yes, he's been dressing up the stars for decades, starting his career in the swinging 60s. His creations remain a wardrobe staple across the country. He's met royalty, he's created outfits for pop stars and helped discover some of the biggest supermodels. Have you ever heard of Jeff Banks? Of course you have. He's live, he's in the studio now. Fashion designer Jeff Banks. So amazing to see you.
Thank you for inviting me. It's
you
brilliant.
look so well as well.
Thank you.
Can I ask, how old are you? Can you say? You don't need to say.
I'm actually 81.
He's 81. Look at him, people. He looks good, doesn't he? Look at those lovely blue eyes. So, Jeff, so talk to me, because your story is quite fascinating. You were born in Wales.
Yeah, I was born in a town called Ebervale.
Yeah.
In a street called Drizziog Street, which was a terraced house overlooking the steelworks. The other claim to fame of Ebervale was Aneurin Bevan, who was Member of Parliament for Ebervale, actually introduced the health system under the Clement Attlee government. Right. So I grew up in a backdrop of kind of tough labour. And my family moved after the war to London, to Catford, South East London, which is where I grew up most of the time, and went back to Wales, Easter, summer holidays. I got dispatched. And kind of lived life on the mountainside, running around with mates in South Wales. So I kind of have a real industrial background to what I do. Yeah.
Yeah. Wales is beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, Wales is wonderful. Ebervale, unfortunately, when I was going there, had the steelworks right the way through the centre of the town.
Right.
And it literally, there was like a layer of smog. You couldn't see the other side of the valley from one side. It just hung there. Once you got above that onto the mountains, it was brilliant. And as a kid, I just roamed wild there. But the house I was born in had one cold water tap in the kitchen, no electricity, an outside toilet, and my grandmother cooked just on an open fire range, a coal range, never had gas or electricity, and she did everything on this kind of open fire. So that was the kind of background that I grew up in. Yeah.
Fascinating, isn't it? So when you came to London, I understand that a teacher saw your artwork. You were 8 years old, and from there you studied art. And talk to me about what happened. How you got yourself into.
Yeah, what happened was when I was 8, my father left.
Oh yes.
And left my mother. So she brought me up as a one-parent family. She was working at the British Home Stores Cafe in Lewisham, and I won a scholarship to a public school. And she was earning £8 a week and couldn't afford the uniform. So the only way I could get the money to buy the uniform was I made a wheelbarrow out of pram wheels and wood and five 5-gallon drums of paraffin. And paraffin was what people used in those days instead of central heating. And I used to run this barrow around the streets at night, delivering paraffin to like old people that couldn't carry the cans. And I made 4p a gallon. So I bought it for 2 and a penny, sold it for 2 and 5p, and every time I did a run, I made £1. So by the time I was 12, I was earning 2-3 times my mum's wages. I actually did quite well. And by the time I was 15, I sold the business. I'd actually bought an oil tanker and I sold the business. And that gave me the money when I left art school to start up my own business. And that's how I fell into it. Yeah.
Quite
Lucky.
impressive. And your first business, what was your first?
It was called Clobber. I actually had no intention of going into fashion. I was a textile designer by trade. I wanted to open my own office and found this little shop in Blackheath. And a mate of mine, Tony, who made suits for me, he wanted to do the same thing. So we said, why don't we collaborate, open a shop together? Two's better than one. We got on very well together. And we opened this little shop in the middle of Blackheath. And I got most of my friends from art college, Ozzie Clark, Folan Tuffin, Moya Bowler, great names in the 60s, to make the clothes for the shop. And we sold out on the first day.
Wow.
So absolutely huge success. And people like Terence Stamp and Jean Shrimpton and Glenda Jackson all came to the opening. And we turned 6 months' work into cash literally overnight. And then the following morning, we were sweeping up, thinking, what are we going to do next? And this wonderful lady called Frida Fairway appeared. She was like Mary Poppins with a long raincoat, straw hat, and she was Mary Quant's design room manager. And she was looking for a job closer to home. So we explained the problem, and at the back of the shop, we had this giant kind of glass-roofed building, because the shop originally was a bakery. And took her Frida out the back and she said, oh, this would make a wonderful workroom. And within a week, she had 12 machinists, a pattern cutter and cutter called Sid, and we were making our own stuff.
Wow.
And it just took off like wildfire. And it was so easy in those days. Wow. It's like, this was before Bieber, it was before... There were only about... Mary had 2 shops, a guy called James Wedge who had 2 shops in the King's Road, Tracy had a shop in Middlesbrough, and that was the swinging 60s at that time. So we were kind of right in the beginning.
Well, that's it. You need to get there in the beginning, don't
Absolutely,
you?
Yeah.
Really get the cream.
Yeah.
But you also set up Warehouse. No, I used to...
Yeah, that was...
I used to get all my clothes from there.
That was years later. That was... in '69, I sold Clobber and started my own Jeff Banks collection. And I got kind of knocked back a bit by a big retail store group. And I thought, I want to open my own stores, and I really want to be able to manufacture, sell it directly to the public, and this idea of Warehouse, a direct factory-to-consumer idea. And with 2 other guys, Michael and Maurice Bennett, we started Warehouse in '76. And again, that was an immediate success. And we had the most amazing clientele. I mean, Princess Di used to shop with us in, like, Brompton Road shop, just all over the country. We had an amazing following. So, and that Warehouse model has become really the retail model around the world. We were the very first to manufacture in our own factory, put it into our own stores, and now the likes of Zara, everybody, it's the way it works. So, yeah, we were really innovative in that period. Fantastic.
It was, quite incredible.
Lucky.
And then when I sort of discovered you was the Clothes Show, which was this incredible show on the BBC, which...
Yeah, that was again lucky. I won Designer of the Year 2 years running in, I think it was 80 and 81. And in those days, the Design of the Year awards were run at Yorkshire Television up in Harrogate. And you'd go up there and they'd make the programme there. And the producer said to me, we've got a gap where we need to reset the stage. Would you mind doing a little acceptance speech? It's not going to go out. Say what you like, yeah, just take it from there. So I blabbered on for 5-10 minutes, and they were short of time, so they put some of the speech into the programme that then got sent out the following night. And somebody at the BBC spotted it and called me up and said, you know, they wanted somebody to present television fashion on Pebble Mill at 1. So would I, like to come along for a trial? And I then ended up doing fashion on Pebble Mill at 1 for about 7 years. But while I was doing it, I thought there is no other national fashion programme. There's loads of cooking shows and car shows and all the rest of it. And I had 2 great producers there. A guy called Roger Castles was one of them. And I said to Roger, if we could stitch some bits of mine together, maybe it would make a show. And I called it the Clothes Show. So we could do anything on fashion, any kind of clothing. And my wife at the time was a lady called Sandy Shaw, a great pop singer. And Sandy's manager had a bloke working in her office for a long time called Michael Grade, who eventually became Lord Grade. And he was like the assistant in the office. So I knew Michael. So I rang Michael up and told him about this idea I had. And he said, oh, send me the tape. This is in about 1984. He then disappeared to America to set up a TV station in America. Came back in 87 and rang me and said, you know that idea you had? Did anything happen? And I said, no. He said, could you make 11 shows starting in 7 weeks?
Wow.
That was at 8 o'clock at night. At midnight, he rang me and said, I've got Selena Scott kind of doing nothing at the moment. Would you take her as your co-presenter? And this was like, she was a major star, incredibly beautiful, a wonderful presenter. And that was luck. I mean, that was so... The show immediately got massive ratings. And eventually, when he transferred it to Sunday night, we used to get a 10 million audience on a Sunday evening, which was incredible. Yeah.
That's pretty incredible.
Lucky.
That's really good. Well, to be fair, there weren't that many channels there are now, but wow.
Well, when you think, maybe whatever's Got Talent gets 7 million.
Yeah.
That we were getting, 9-10 million regularly. Yeah. And we did a load of firsts on... I mean, I have to say, loads of people have asked me to do it again, and there just aren't the facilities that I had really at Birmingham. Great directors, great producers. We won a BAFTA for editing. It was really high quality. And that really actually was the benefit. It could never happen today. There wouldn't be the money to do it.
So finally, Jeff, what are you up to now? What are you doing now?
Me? I'm still designing clothes. It's what I love and enjoy. I also do a lot of furniture, a lot of home furnishing. Believe it or not, one project that I'm working on are 2 new concepts of paint. So that's another variation for me. And I'm working on a formula of paint that can actually absorb unclean air, filter the air, and send it back out clean.
Wow.
Get rid of all formaldehyde in the...
Amazing.
So that's an interesting project, yeah.
Well, listen, Jeff, it's been so good to talk to you. I know you do workwear now as well. You've got a business that does that.
I used to own my own corporate clothing company. Yeah. I sold that to an Australian firm about 10 years ago. Oh. So I did all of the big banks, Barclays, NatWest, Nationwide. I did Butlins. I did a lot of kind of like uniform clothing. So that's one of the... I don't do that anymore. I sold the business. But yeah, I enjoyed doing that and actually working very closely, particularly with Barclays. They were really good fun to work with. So yeah.
Jeff Banks, absolute legend. Thank you very much for joining me. It's really good to talk to you. That is, of course, fashion designer Jeff Banks. Incredible, right? 31 minutes after 5 o'clock. If you've just tuned in, welcome on board. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. Still to come. We'll continue with the Great British Debate. And I'm asking, is it time to park reparations? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, Danny Kelly and Jonathan Liss. But first, let's get your latest news headlines with Katie Bowen.
Nana, thank you. It's just gone 5:30. These are your latest headlines from the GB newsroom. The King says he's greatly saddened by the sudden death of Alex Salmond, the former First Minister of Scotland. The Alba Party leader died yesterday afternoon, aged 69, from a suspected heart attack during a trip to North Macedonia. Mr Salmond had made a speech at the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy Forum and is understood to have collapsed at lunch in a crowded room. There will be a post-mortem examination to confirm the cause of death. Jonathan Reynolds says it's not the government's position that P&O Ferries is a rogue operator, despite a press release this week calling them a rogue employer. P&O Ferries' owner, DP World, will attend the International Investment Summit tomorrow. They had previously threatened to pull out of the event and a £1 billion port investment. That's after the Transport Secretary, Louise Haigh, criticised their employment strategy and called for a boycott. The operator was criticised by politicians from both main parties in March 2022, when it suddenly sacked 800 British seafarers and replaced them with cheaper, mainly overseas staff, saying it was necessary to stave off bankruptcy. The business secretary told GB News' Camilla Tominey that the £1 billion investment will go ahead.
Quickly on this issue, that's not the government's position. The issue, obviously, with P&O Ferries is we're not going to recoil from that. We thought it was wrong, the fire and rehire that we saw, those workers being sacked and then taken back on fewer terms and conditions. But we have changed the law. It was lawful under the Conservative government. It will be unlawful under this Labour government. So where companies accept that, acknowledge that, can work within that framework, we'll, of course, talk to them about investments. And I can tell you they're coming to the summit and the investment will go ahead.
And briefly to the Middle East now, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has spoken in the last hour and expressed his regret of any harm done to UN personnel in Lebanon after 15 peacekeepers were injured in what they call a shocking violation when Israeli tanks forcibly entered their base. Israel's UN envoy has also spoken a short time ago, saying it is incomprehensible that the UN is keeping Lebanon peacekeepers in the line of fire. The UK is among 40 nations strongly condemning attacks on those UN peacekeepers. Lebanon's health ministry says at least 15 people have been killed in the last day by Israeli airstrikes on 3 different villages. And Israeli military say around 115 rockets have been fired from Lebanon into Israel today. Those are your latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Katie Bowen. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon and welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Still chilly through this afternoon, particularly down the east coast, but we will start to see some rain and some cloud arriving from the west, and it will begin to turn a little bit milder. But at first, still got that high pressure, so fairly calm conditions across particularly the eastern half of the UK. But as we head through this evening, developing a southerly wind, and we've got these frontal systems arriving from the west. So that rain arriving from the west, thickening cloud across the far north, and we'll start to see some particularly heavy outbursts of rain across parts of Devon and Cornwall and parts of Wales through this evening as well. The winds picking up here particularly as well, turning quite blustery overnight as that rain moves slowly eastwards. Milder under the southerly airflow, temperatures into the double figures, but still cool across the far north into the single figures again here, and still a chilly start to the day on Monday. But as we head further south, we do still have this rain lingering on through Monday morning. So quite a grey and damp start to the day. Quite difficult driving conditions for the rush hour. A little bit drier the further west that you go, and some bright sunshine to start the day across Northern Ireland. Similarly, there'll be some brighter sunny spells across parts of Scotland, but across the far northwest, still holding on to this area of rain as well. Through the rest of the day, that rain will slowly start to move away, and we will start to see something a little bit drier across the southern half of the UK, but it will hold on to the cloud through much of Monday. You'll still be holding on to that quite grey and perhaps drizzly conditions on perhaps some coast and over some high ground. But for Northern Ireland, the far north of England and Scotland, there will be some decent sunny spells around. Temperatures here will be a touch higher than we saw on Sunday, and across the south milder, although still fairly cloudy, so those temperatures perhaps not feeling quite as warm. Heading through this evening, it's still holding on to a fairly cloudy picture across the southern half of the UK. Further north still, they're going to have these clearer spells developing as well. Through Tuesday, most places will be staying dry, but we start to see some wet weather moving in through Wednesday. That's all from me. Catch you later.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Conservative MPs have finally chosen their top 2 for the leadership. And now, it's over to the members. Join me, Christopher Hope, on Thursday as Kevin Badenoch and Robert Jenrick are quizzed by Conservative Party members and myself at our GB News leadership event.
And afterwards, join me, Patrick Christie, from the live studio audience and a star panel as we discuss what it means for the Conservative Party and what it means for you. Decision time, the race to lead, from 7 p.m. this Thursday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, 38 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News. We are Britain's news channel. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Don't forget as well, you can stream the programmes live on YouTube. I'm Nana Akua. Right, it's time now for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is it time to park reparations? The King and the Prime Minister face demands for the UK to pay £200 billion in reparations over Britain's role in the slave trade, the transatlantic slave trade. A group of 15 Caribbean governments have agreed to put slavery reparations on the table at the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Samoa in 2 weeks' time. So what do you think for the Great British Debate this hour? I did a monologue on it, or a niggle. Have a look at it, have a read of it, or watch it. I'm asking, is it time now to park reparations? Well, joining me now, author and broadcaster Danny Kelly. He wrote a cookbook with about 16 pages.
I did, yeah.
16 pages, yeah.
I'm an author, yeah.
And also,
I forgot about that.
political commentator Jonathan Liss. Right, Danny Kelly, is it time for us to park these reparations?
What are they going to do with the dough? Has anyone asked them? If you get all of these billions of pounds, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to spend it?
I guess.
But what are they going to spend it on?
Well, who gets the money as well?
Seriously, what are they going to spend it on?
I think that there is a really sensitive conversation to be had about it. I don't think there is, an absolute right or wrong. I think that there's a journalist, a former journalist for the BBC, Laura Trevelyan, who's done some really interesting stuff on this, actually. I think that... All right, OK, a minority view on the panel, it turns out.
She got together some people who felt guilty about the slave trade. No, I'll just quickly give some people some background. And then between them, they've rustled up about 100 grand to give to the people in Grenada. 100 grand. I mean, look, if you're going to be serious, give up everything. If that's how much
there are families in this country who got incredibly rich off the back of slavery, and we know that when slavery ended, the people who got compensated were the slave owners, not the slaves. These are all facts, and so it is quite legitimate to ask that to the question, sort of 200 years on, what are we going to do to address this injustice that still lingers, because you do have countries that got incredibly rich off the back of slavery and countries that are still dealing with the legacy of slavery and colonialism more broadly. And so, obviously...
Well, we've actually got slavery going on right now.
We have modern slavery.
And in fact, your phone and all this stuff here that we've got, a lot of it is made by child labour, enslaved in little, factories and things like that.
It's not either or.
Well, no, I'm not saying either or. I'm saying, what about now?
Well,
to me, the best reparation would be to not do it, to stop it.
The figure's being bandied about, something like 200 billion.
200 billion.
And, we were part of the slave triangle. So Liverpool, my home city, which I don't know if you've been to Liverpool, it's a fabulous city.
I was there a couple of weeks ago.
But, Jonathan, how do you know that in your DNA...
That's the end of that. Then.
How do you know, Jonathan? It's not very interesting, Danny, I'm sorry.
It's all to do with the slave triangle. It's to do with the slave triangle.
I know. But what I'm asking, Jonathan, is how do you know in your DNA that you're not connected to it somewhere? Like, you could be... If I did my DNA, I might be one of the slave owners from the black families who had slaves and who bought slaves. No, but I could be. Okay, somewhere in your DNA, it could be there.
Given that my family were sort of Jews from remote villages in Eastern Europe, I think it's unlikely they're involved in the slave trade.
So let me just guess. So how would it work then? Because I live in this country. I was born in Newcastle. Are my taxes, am I to pay part of this reparation for the slave trade in another country? I mean, my family could have somewhere in there, my DNA. I could have been a slave, although I don't think I was. So
am
I paying for it as well? It doesn't make any sense, does it?
Look, I think that you have to take it out of the realm of the individual and make it the role of the state, because the state slave trade may enrich the state as well as individual families. I don't think that, obviously, Laura Trevelyan should not be compelled to give any money to Grenada. This is something that she has done because she has recognised the injustices that led to her family becoming incredibly rich.
They rustled up 100 grand. There's over 100,000 Grenadas. It's £1 a person.
Well, I don't know how much, but it's the start of something. It's the start. Look, it's the start of something. Obviously, there will be gestures involved in this, but there are a lot of countries in the Caribbean who could benefit from money in all sorts of ways to invest in specific projects.
I'm sorry.
And we should find out what those might be.
You know what? You don't know who to give the money to. You don't know whether some of the people receiving the money, it may have had families who were involved in the slave trade in a negative manner. So let's be honest, that trade couldn't have happened without some agreement of the people there. So some people would have been families from slave owners who may well have dark skin. And some people who live in Grenada didn't live in Grenada before. They lived somewhere else. They came to live in Grenada now and so have no connection with Grenada at all. But they happen to be there when the compensation is being paid. It's utter madness. Danny Kelly.
Can I make a point after Danny?
No, you can do it after.
Nana wants to hear my views now.
If you don't mind.
And I don't mind. I was going back to Liverpool. The whole city was built, not the whole city, fabulous wide streets in Liverpool, big buildings. You know, when you get really wide streets, it's a sign of wealth. Wide streets are the sign of wealth. That's why a lot of housing estates nowadays, skinny little streets, you've got to park half on the pavement, half on the road, because the developers want as much houses as possible. OK, so the city of Liverpool was built on the slave money. I think if we have to find who else is going to pay for it? It's going to be the British taxpayer, because we were part of the slave triangle.
That's my point.
Liverpool, Bristol, North Africa, the West Indies.
And what about the Africans? Are they going to pay for their parts
It's
of selling their
collective,
people?
fiscal, financial, punitive punishment for the taxpayer in 2024 for reparations to repair the damage. I'm not diluting the damage.
No, but nobody's saying there wasn't damage done, but there are also some positive things that would have come out of it in terms of industrialisation. But my point is simply this, that who are you paying? Because the people of Grenada, somebody's moved from Taiwan to Grenada, somebody's moved from Ghana to Grenada, they're living in Grenada, you're paying reparations to Grenada. Hang on, no, you're paying the money to Grenada, but half the people in Grenada may not even be from... Who's getting the money?
Well, I don't think that we can say that there's a side, like the majority of the people in Grenada are unconnected to this.
Well, but a lot of people are.
Yes, well, some might be.
Just because they're black doesn't mean that they had something to do.
Well, no.
Connection with it.
Well, I do think it's by the way, go back to your early point, there is obviously a very strong likelihood that a lot of people in Grenada will be descendants of slaves. We know the reason for that. That's because slaves notoriously weren't very...
Yeah, but some of those people may have moved to the UK, they've moved to other countries around the world as well. So when you know what I mean? If you're asking people who live in the UK to be paying reparations for a country where a lot of people from Grenada actually live in the UK now, it doesn't even make any sense.
Well, I just don't accept that.
Well, who gets the money?
The majority of people in Grenada are descended from slaves. I don't think that's uncontroversial to say. And so if you're transferring money from the UK government to the Grenadian government, that would involve the country that was involved in the slave trade, sort of compensating in some way a country that's descended from those slaves.
It's too indiscriminate, and it doesn't really work. It doesn't make any sense, because those who are paying it may also come from Grenada, or live in this country. And you can't... It's not as straightforward as that.
No, nothing is going to be completely sort of clean and...
It's so much to go, hundreds of billions of pounds. Would you, Jonathan, be happy paying hundreds of pounds more in your tax to send over to...
The amount of money would obviously be up for debate, and where the money would be going. Should it be going straight into the government coffers, or should it be going into specific projects, for example, like you might have had under the international development budget or whatever?
How much would you be happy paying?
I'm not going to put a figure on it, Danny.
Come on, Jonathan. Come on, Jonathan.
No, absolutely not. But I do know that in a much more recent atrocity, sort of Jewish people did receive money from the German government after the Holocaust,
yes,
for example.
directly after it. That's absolutely right, but not 200 years later.
No, but the reason that the slaves didn't receive money immediately afterwards is that there was immense racism and colonialism that persisted for 150 plus years afterwards.
That's true.
If it hadn't happened, then they should have received that money rather than the slave owners who were compensated by the British government, which, by the way, was only paid off a couple of years ago.
Yeah, but let's be honest, it was a business at the time which seemed legitimate for them, and it was a business business. It's why they paid off the businesses. So you have to put yourself back into the frame of that particular thing.
We can go into
but
that
hang
kind
on.
of moral relativism.
No, I can, and I will. It was a business, but obviously it was a horrible, disgraceful business. But that's why the slave owners were paid, and some of the slave owners may well have been from Grenada themselves. Right, coming up, it's My Supplement Sunday, where my panel and I discuss some of the stories that caught their eye this week. Don't go anywhere.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Please tell me that we're British. In our darkest hour, we can work around this. The beer will still be flowing at Christmas. Tell me, please.
Martin, without using bad language, there's no words to describe that this is another major blow to the hospitality sector. I wake up every day with anxiety thinking, what's going to happen to us now? Oh my God, now the weather's against us. Not only are the government absolutely battering us, then the weather's now hitting us as well.
Kate Stewart, this can only mean one thing. Prices, once again, going through the roof.
And there's nothing we can do. We have on costs. We have to buy from the brewery. We have the VAT. We have then the VAT, what we take. It is an absolute nightmare. To be in the pub game now, Martin, is very, very difficult. And there's no light at the end of the tunnel. Everything just keeps hammering us from every different direction. And obviously, we have to pass that on to the customers, then price increases. There's nothing we can do. We don't want to sell beer at an inflated price. We want it as cheap as possible to get people through them doors. But we have no option. They're going to go up again in the new budget. You know, there's no help for us. What are we supposed to do, Martin, except the only option is to close the doors and say, enough is enough. We can't do this anymore. I absolutely cry my eyes out having to put the prices up because you think, oh, my God, people are just going to turn away and walk. But we can't swallow the costs all the time, Martin. It's impossible for us to do because we will go bankrupt. There has to be there's inflation getting hammered on us yet again, and we have to pass it on. I feel it when I take my children out for something to eat. You're like, wow, that has just cost a fortune. But what is the answer? The answer is the government needs to look at saving the hospitality sector and stop being so greedy in everything that they take away from us, or there won't be pubs.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Right, it's time now for Supplement Sunday. They're laughing at me. The part of the show where my panel and I take a look at some of the stories that have caught their eye. Joining me, political commentator Jonathan Liss, also journalist and broadcaster Danny Kelly. Right, I think we start with Danny Kelly.
OK, Wyn Evans, he's the little fat guy from the Go Compare adverts.
Oh, yeah.
He's now on Strictly Come Dancing. No, hey, listen, fat fellas can call other people fat. It's the same as lots of things that confuse people in society. If you're fat, you can get away with it. Wyn Evans found love again with his new girlfriend after a breakdown of a 16-year marriage as his wandering hand moment. Oh, come here, Nana. Is starting to raise eyebrows. And another scandal at Strictly Come Dancing. But anyway, bit of good news for him today. 16-year marriage, that failed. He's got a new bird.
Oh, that's right.
Not the dancer, though.
No. Oh, no, she doesn't like him.
Well, maybe... Well, she may like him, but she wouldn't like
Apparently, didn't they say that it was just a joke?
They did, but if you've seen the footage, it's not a joke.
It's not a joke. And maybe the other bird, he had a new bird. Maybe he hasn't got one now after that.
Actually, you're right, the wandering hand. Wandering hand syndrome.
Jonathan Liss.
Is it bad that I've never watched a single episode?
Me and you, I've never watched one.
Why are you talking about it then?
Because lots of viewers. I don't think selfishly. I think selflessly, Jonathan. Interesting insight.
Jonathan Liss.
I told on myself there. I'm sorry. Yes, all right. Okay, I've got a story about Christopher Columbus has turned out to possibly have been Jewish, which I didn't have on my bingo card. There's a story in the BBC today that he might have been one of the conversos, one of the Jewish people who were forcibly converted and had to hide their Jewish faith in late 15th century Spain, and then went and obviously did a lot of really terrible things in the Americas.
All right.
Yeah, the story didn't end that well after all that. I'm not sure we should claim he was one of our own after all that. But it's interesting. Certainly, it would be an interesting development.
All right. Well, listen, this is my supplement, and I just wanted you to see this wonderful little baby because I just thought it was so cute, dancing around. Look. So little baby, he's doing a little dance, he's shaking his booty, and then I wonder if we could get rid of that strap underneath. And then he does his little turns.
Oh,
and then
he's got rhythm, that baby.
He's got rhythm, and then look at this. I like this last bit where he goes...
When a bit sort of that's like with a little bit of this, what's that song?
He did it like... He does his little turns. Isn't he cute? He's lovely, isn't he? He's wonderful. Well, listen, on today's show, what was our poll question? I've been asking you, would you have a pylon in your backyard? Not literally. And what was the answer to our Twitter poll? We did request that.
I imagine it'll be sort of 99.9%.
Do you think? Let's have a look. Let's see if my producer can rustle up the answer to that on the Twitter poll. Yes, so I was asking, would you have a pylon in your backyard? Jonathan List, would you have one in your backyard?
No, you've been by creams to that, Nana.
I knew it. I knew we'd go there in the end. And Danny Kelly, would you?
No, I would not have a pylon anywhere near my back garden. No chance. Not for all the tea in China.
Ah.
Don't hear that expression enough.
Not for all the tea in China.
No, you don't.
No, not anymore. Well, listen, I think it's probably near 100%. We've got the poll now. Here it comes. Right, so according to our Twitter poll, I knew it. 94% of you said no way.
Yes.
And 5% of you said yes. That's probably Jim Dale pressing lots of buttons 100 times. Yeah. Well, listen, no, I would never pylon in my backyard. I wouldn't have it. Keep it clean, honestly. What's wrong with you lot today? Right, well, I've got to say a huge thank you to my panel, political commentator Jonathan List. Jonathan List, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Great to have your company.
And yours.
And also thank you so much to the brilliant Danny Kelly. Danny Kelly, thank you so much.
And modest.
He's modest as well. And as ever, a huge thank you to you at home for your company. Really a pleasure to talk to you today. I look forward to seeing you on Friday for Britain's Newsroom. I'll be there from 9:30. And, of course, Saturday and Sunday, same time, same place. Stay tuned. Loads more still to come on GB News. You can download the app to get all the shows for free. We've got lots coming up. Take care. Enjoy your week. See you soon.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon and welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Still chilly through this afternoon, particularly down the east coast, but we will start to see some rain and some cloud arriving from the west, and it will begin to turn a little bit milder. But at first, still got a high pressure, so fairly calm conditions across particularly the eastern half of the UK. But as we head through this evening, developing a southerly wind, and we've got these frontal systems arriving from the west. So that rain arriving from the west, thickening cloud across the far north, and we'll start to see some particularly heavy outbursts of rain across parts of Devon and Cornwall and parts of Wales through this evening as well. The wind's picking up here particularly as well, turning quite blustery overnight as that rain moves slowly eastwards. Milder under the southerly airflow, temperatures into the double figures, but still cool across the far north into the single figures again here, and still a chilly start to the day on Monday. But as we head further south, we do still have this rain lingering on through Monday morning, so quite a grey and damp start to the day. Quite difficult driving conditions for the rush hour. A little bit drier the further west that you go, and some bright sunshine to start the day across Northern Ireland. Similarly, there'll be some brighter sunny spells across parts of Scotland, but across the far northwest, still holding onto this area of rain as well. Through the rest of the day, that rain will slowly start to move away, and we will start to see something a little bit drier across the southern half of the UK, but it will hold onto the cloud through much of Monday. You'll still be holding onto that quite grey and perhaps drizzly conditions on perhaps some coast and over some high ground. But for Northern Ireland, the far north of England and Scotland, there will be some decent sunny spells around. Temperatures here will be a touch higher than we saw on Sunday, and across the south milder, although still fairly cloudy, so those temperatures perhaps not feeling quite as warm. Heading through this evening, it's still holding on to a fairly cloudy picture across the southern half of the UK. Further north still, they're going to have these clearer spells developing as well. Through Tuesday, most places will be staying dry, but we start to see some wet weather moving in through Wednesday. That's all from me. Catch you later.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
There's only 2 weeks.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark meets at My Take at 10. Democracy is a funny old thing. And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it. Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good evening, it's just gone 6 o'clock. I'm Katie Bowen and these are your latest headlines from the GB Newsroom. The King says he's greatly saddened by the sudden death of Alex Salmond, the former First Minister of Scotland. The Alba Party leader died yesterday afternoon, aged 69, from a suspected heart attack during a trip to North Macedonia. Mr Salmond had made a speech at the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy Forum and is understood to have collapsed at lunch in a crowded room. There will be a post-mortem examination to confirm the cause of death. Jonathan Reynolds says it's not the government's position that P&O Ferries is a rogue operator, despite a press release this